Chapter 920. When the cabin door was closed, the sound of breaking and the loud noise of the crowd finally came. Zhong Yongming, whose face was red, was stiff and trembling. The other directors, including the mayor of Huading, all looked at each other. Everyone had a blank look on their faces. Even the two experts at the peak of the thundershocking realm in Kunlun City behind Gu Xianyan were confused. What's wrong? Someone suddenly asked the question in everyone's mind. They did see the young emperor of Emperor Dong's palace just now. In a short time, he walked down the gangway step by step. Everyone was looking at him. It was a matter of a moment. His feet landed on the ground and he took a step forward. Then he turned around and walked back. The cabin door was closed. What's going on? The deputy speaker from the prince group muttered to himself blankly and then became a little angry. Didn't they say they were going to find an invincible realm killer? He came, showed his face, and left without even saying a word? He subconsciously glanced at Zhong Yongming. Then he glanced at Zhou Yu, the mayor of Huading. Zhou Yu's expression was calm and indifferent, even with a hint of a smile. Born in the North Group, he could rise from the deputy speaker of Northern City to the mayor of Huading, which was definitely an exceptional promotion. Huading's status in Zhongzhou State was too special. The position of mayor had always been more valuable than the position of governor of other provinces, more attractive than even the speaker of some backward provinces, and more important than the deputy speaker of Northern City. Coming from the North Group, he could become the mayor of Huading, which was one of the most successful operations of the North Group, closely following the academics and the Prince Group in the past 2 years. And many people knew very well that Zhou Yu had a close relationship with Han Donglu, the military counselor of Emperor Dong's palace. Now the rumors of the new group were buzzing. When the new group officially appeared, Zhou Yu would inevitably be the backbone of it. This was not an ordinary change. Because everyone knew Zhou Yu's position in the North Group. He was Zhou Yunhai's nephew. To be more precise, if there was no new group, Zhou Yu would be the future successor of the North Group. His entering the new group meant too many things. Zhou Yu's attitude was very proper, without any resentment of being ignored. There was even a little smile in his eyes. He glanced at Zhong Yongming with a playful look. Zhong Yongming gritted his teeth. His extreme anger was mixed with some doubts. He didn't know what Li Tianlan was doing. He was very sure that he had held the Golden Retriever's chain. So, did Li Tianlan fly all the way here to let her admire his Golden Retriever instead of looking for trouble? Or did he want him to taste the dog leash? He only showed it to her. So stingy. As his imagination ran wild, he became more and more resentful, and he couldn't help but take a step forward. The sudden voice from the walkie-talkie caused everyone to freeze in place once again. Reporting, the target has been spotted at Gate 9 of the airport lobby. Target spotted? Zhong Yongming hesitated for a moment before picking up the walkie-talkie. What target? The person on the other end of the walkie-talkie suddenly fell into silence, as if surprised by the stupidity of the question. After a pause of 2 seconds, the man said carefully, "Report, the target has been confirmed to be Invincible Realm Killer Ju. The target has been confirmed dead." A clear voice came from the walkie-talkie to the ears of the 13 directors. Zhong Yongming was stunned and stared at the walkie-talkie in his hand in disbelief. "What the? It confirmed dead," he muttered to himself and suddenly reacted. He shouted, "How did he die?" His heart was pierced by a punch, and the power shattered the target's internal organs. The killing intent seemed to come from outside the airport lobby, because the moment the huge power appeared, it directly shattered the glass wall of the lobby. The specific cause of death needs to be studied. The voice on the other end of the walkie-talkie finally became a little hesitant. He was an expert arranged by the Huading Parliament to stay in the airport lobby. Although he was far from the invincible realm, the strength of the thundershocking realm also meant that he had a good eye. But now such an old general couldn't determine the cause of death of Ju? What was going on? It was a mess. It was inexplicable. It was too fake. It was impossible. Messy thoughts popped up in his mind. 1 second, Zhong Yongming's body suddenly stiffened. He tried to recall the scene in that instant. He caught the dog leash that looked ordinary. The Golden Retriever raised its head and glanced at him innocently. The moment he looked down at the golden retriever's eyes, he saw a palm covered with blood. The palm took the chain from his hand and walked up the gangway silently. So, was it that second just now? In that second, Li Tianlan loosened the iron chain and directly appeared in the airport hall a kilometer away. He smashed the huge glass wall and found a dead end in an instant. He smashed the man's heart with a punch, and then appeared in front of the plane and took over the iron chain. Zhu dead? Was he really dead? Just for a second? Unarmed, a distance of thousands of meters, tens of thousands of tourists, instantly locked on and killed with one blow? Zhong Yongming's anger disappeared without a trace in an instant. An inexplicable chill enveloped him. He only felt that the world was extremely illusory, and everything just now seemed to be an illusion. How was it possible? Why was it like this? He stood in front of the plane, looked up at the cold fuselage and thought in a trance. How was it possible? Why was it like this? In the lobby of the cabin, blood flowed along the flat floor. He lay there quietly, and the warm wind in the lobby seemed to pour into his chest with an extremely cold temperature. The dazzling light from the ceiling sprinkled down. The panicked roar of the crowd continued to echo. Someone approached and seemed to be saying something. The voice was extremely vague and could not be heard clearly at all. He lay there quietly. He knew that he was dead. But the strong vitality of an invincible realm expert still allowed him to retain a trace of consciousness. He was not sure what had happened. In the blink of an eye, the dense sword intent instantly poured into the lobby and enveloped everyone in the entire airport. The moment the sword energy touched his domain of the invincible realm, his whole body had been completely locked. It was too late to get up and escape. The majestic power surged over from afar in an instant. His domain, his body, his concealment, and everything he was proud of became a joke in the face of the majestic power. Li Tianlan personally took action. The fist smashed all his resistance in an instant. The amazing power in the distance had condensed to one point the moment it pierced his chest, and all of it burst out completely in his chest. His internal organs, all the joints of his body, countless muscles, blood vessels, and even his skin were completely broken under the tremendous power. The sound of the glass wall breaking was so shocking. But the real murder was silent. The killing that crossed a kilometer was quiet and did not even affect anyone nearby. The power of the punch was condensed to the limit and directly acted on him. The seat under him didn't even change. He was really going to die. The light in his sight became dimmer and dimmer. The last vitality slowly disappeared, and his consciousness began to sink. He wanted to clench his fist. In his remaining consciousness, fear and resentment had disappeared. Only unwillingness was left. He was the only invincible realm killer in the dark world today. He had established his own force and had a very good start. In the future, he should stand at the peak of the new era of the dark world and make everyone live in fear and shadow. He still had a lot of things to do and a lot of plans to implement. Since he became an invincible realm expert, he had not even really assassinated a powerful figure. But now, he was dead. He was insta-killed by a punch. The strength of the invincible realm had become a joke. Why was it like this? He tried to open his mouth, but the light in front of him was getting dimmer and dimmer, and finally turned into complete darkness. In front of the plane, everyone was still immersed in the shock of Zhu's sudden death. The huge shock made everyone unable to organize their words for a while. So they froze in place, like statues. The night became dark. The lights of the airport began to shine. Zhong Yongming finally took another step forward. But all the anger had been completely restrained by him. His tone was calm, but there was an obvious concession. "Your Highness, if possible, I want to talk to you." His voice was not high. But for people like Li Tianlan who were almost inhuman, no matter how low the voice was, as long as he wanted to hear it, he could always hear it. There was silence in the plane. The captain patiently waited for the airport to arrange the route and prepare to return. There seemed to be someone inside reporting something, but it seemed that nothing was reported. 2 minutes later, the cabin door opened again. The gangway fell down. A slim young woman who looked quiet and sweet appeared in front of the cabin door. Every council member of Huading knew this young woman. She was Han Xinyan, the daughter of Han Donglu. She was also the current chief secretary of Emperor Dong's palace. Zhong Yongming thought that he was not disgraced. He breathed a sigh of relief and subconsciously stepped forward. The next second his footsteps froze. Han Xinyan's voice sounded when he stepped forward. "Mayor Zhou, His Majesty wants to see you." Zhong Yongming stepped forward with one foot, and the other foot stayed there. He was extremely embarrassed. What made him most embarrassed was that Han Xinyan did not look at him from beginning to end. She looked at Zhou Yu with a gentle smile. Zhou Yu seemed to be a little surprised. But he was more surprised. Among the 13 council members, a deputy mayor who was closer to him was also surprised. Zhou Yu took a deep breath, nodded with a smile, and walked up the gangway without looking at Zhong Yongming. Zhong Yongming's face had turned black. His voice instantly became louder. "Secretary Han." His voice was slow and dignified, with an indescribable power in the night sky. "I also have something to talk to Your Highness." He had always insisted on calling her Your Highness, and it was a little rude to make such a request at this time. The other council members came to their senses and looked at Zhong Yongming in surprise. The council members who were still immersed in the despair of death had only one thought at this time. Does the chairman want to die? Zhou Yu had already walked up the gangway. At the cabin door, Han Xinyan glanced at Zhong Yongming with no expression and said lightly, "His Majesty said he doesn't want to talk to you. Mr. Chairman, please behave yourself." Chapter 921. The interior of the private plane was spacious, but it was not extravagant and luxurious. Every detail was exquisite and comfortable. Zhou Yu walked into the cabin door. Led by Han Xinyan, he passed the rest area and was finally taken to the brightly lit reception area. Soft leather sofas were arranged regularly, and the carpet was as soft as cotton. Soft music was playing in the reception area, and a fruit plate was placed on the crystal tea table in the center of the sofa. When Zhou Yu walked in, Li Tianlan, who was a little pale, was pouring water into the teapot. It was just a simple act of pouring water. He put the tea leaves in the teapot and poured hot water into it. After a while, he poured the water into the cup. There was no technical content at all. But the tea leaves were good, or very good. So as the hot water was poured in, the fragrance of the tea quickly spread. Li Tianlan, who was pale, seemed to feel the footsteps. He raised his head and stood up with a smile. Zhou Yu subconsciously quickened his pace. He passed Han Xinyan and took the initiative to stretch out his hands to Li Tianlan. "Your Majesty." Li Tianlan reached out his hand and shook it tightly with him. He patted him with the other hand and smiled apologetically. "Mayor Zhou, I'm sorry. I thought I was still in Northern City. I just came out of the desert and was so busy. If Xinyan hadn't reminded me just now, I'm afraid we would have missed this meeting." This explanation was detailed and sincere, full of sincerity. Zhou Yu was obviously a little excited. He shook his head harder and said with a smile, "Your Majesty, you don't have to say that. I can totally understand. Emperor Dong's palace and Xinyuan City have been developing very well recently. But there are many things that need Your Majesty to worry about. I'm honored that Your Majesty remembers me." Li Tianlan shook his head with a smile. "We're all on the same side. Don't stand on ceremony. Please sit down, Mayor Zhou. Your Majesty, you can just call me by my name. I'm older than you. If you don't mind, you can call me Old Zhou." Zhou Yu sat down with a smile. Han Xinyan, who was bending over to pour tea, trembled slightly and the tea almost spilled out. "Old Zhou." This form of address was so novel that even Zhou Yu would find it strange if he were to say it himself. At the age of 42, he was one of the youngest governor-general officials in Zhongzhou State. Only Zhou Yuanshan, Wang Jingxin and a few others could be on par with him. With this position and his age, it was not appropriate to say that he was in the prime of his life. He could be said to be young and promising. It was estimated that Zhou Yu had never heard such a title like Old Zhou since he entered the official career. "It doesn't matter how I address you." Li Tianlan smiled casually and handed a cigarette to Zhou Yu. "No matter what you call me, Brother Zhou is someone I respect. I really hope that Emperor Dong's palace can have more pillars like Brother Zhou, but it seems to be a bit whimsical. These words were undoubtedly flattering to Zhou Yu. But what Zhou Yu cared about and was most excited about was Li Tianlan's description. Pillar. This meaning was clear and unambiguous. What it meant couldn't be more obvious. He took the cigarette, lit it, took a deep breath, and said with a smile, "Speaking of pillars, His Majesty is the biggest one in Emperor Dong's palace. In all aspects, only with His Majesty can we have space to play and enough motivation." Han Xinyan took 2 steps back and watched the conversation curiously. Qin Weibai said that she was now qualified for the job of Chief Financial Officer of Emperor Dong's palace. In terms of professional ability, she had no problem. But in the end, she was just a young woman 1 year older than Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan was very young, but his personal strength and the support behind him were enough to support him to stand at the highest peak and enjoy the scenery. But Han Xinyan didn't think she was qualified. She still had too much to learn. It was easy to be a secretary, but it was extremely difficult to be Emperor Dong's secretary. So she was learning and improving herself all the time. Zhou Yu was undoubtedly a person worth learning from. Li Tianlan observed Li Tianlan's words and actions. He saw Li Tianlan say mushy words in the most normal, natural, and completely sincere manner, and put on a humble posture. He naturally flattered Li Tianlan and changed the topic from a member of Emperor Dong's palace to a member of Emperor Dong's palace. He expressed his loyalty straightforwardly but not abruptly at all. Although the conversation had just begun, both sides seemed to have received satisfactory answers. Han Xinyan stood aside, deep in thought. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment with a cigarette between his fingers. Then he said slowly, "Of course, in some ways, Brother Zhou and I are completely one. Our advance and retreat is one of the most important things for Emperor Dong's palace. We will do our best to help you, give you more support, and give you more room to play. This is also the purpose of my conversation with you this time. In fact, after the funeral, military counselor suggested that I meet you. But there are still many things in Emperor Dong's palace that haven't been straightened out. I don't have a specific and detailed plan, so I naturally can't give Brother Zhou a specific promise. So I want to postpone the meeting. What does Your Majesty need me to do?" There was a slight smile at the corner of Zhou Yu's mouth. Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace would give him the greatest support, which naturally meant that he had to do something. Military Counselor's Flourishing Age Fund had been developing in Zhongzhou State for many years and had countless tentacles. Money could bring benefits, and the unimaginable amount of money brought an unbreakable covenant. For the North Group, Military Counselor was almost completely tied to them. Zhou Yu was like this. Zhou Yunhai, the current member of the Parliament of Zhongzhou State and the leader of the North Group, was like this. Xia Qiuling, the only member of Parliament in the North Group, was also like this. The core framework of the establishment of the new group should be composed of Wu Jingmin and Bai Qinqian. Then some of the remaining forces of the Li family would come closer. And then, part of the forces of the giant group and nearly half of the forces of the North Group would automatically become the core of the new group. In this way, the lineup of the new group was already very terrifying. But after the emergence of the new group, if the support of the giant group and the North Group was excluded, when the honeymoon period with the Southeast Group was over, the power of the new group still seemed a little immature among the several old groups. Li Tianlan would give them support, but not too much. It was not that he didn't want to, but he couldn't care less. He wanted to establish a new group to gain support, not simply to support others. So many things needed to be fought for by himself. Zhou Yu was very clear about this. And from the North Group to the new group, it was not a matter of a word or a statement. He also needed to do something to prove his position and consolidate his position in the new group. Li Tianlan glanced at him with a chuckle and asked, "I heard that Zhong Yongming has a strong desire for control? Is he also strict about some things in Huating's municipal government?" Zhou Yu's eyes flashed and he said with a faint smile, "The speaker does care about the work of the municipal government, but he doesn't intervene in specific things, especially sensitive ones." From another perspective, this sentence also seemed to indicate that Zhong Yongming couldn't intervene in some of the work of the municipal government, especially the sensitive things. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and glanced at Zhou Yu. Zhou Yu was the mayor, and Zhong Yongming was the speaker. Although Zhong Yongming was one level higher in rank as a member of parliament, in fact, in Huading system, the mayor could not be regarded as the speaker's subordinate, but the speaker's partner. Although Zhou Yu's rank was one level lower, he was the successor of the North Group, which was enough to make up for some of his disadvantages in rank, so he had the conditions to be a strong mayor. The only thing he lacked was some support. Li Tianlan thought of some secret deployments in Huading, gently tapped the teacup, and said with a smile, "Brother Zhou, I haven't met Minister Yunhai yet, but I think he has more expectations for me. So does Emperor Dong's palace. The pillar of Emperor Dong's palace should be someone who can control the overall situation. I can't give him a long-term plan, but at least I can set a short-term goal." He paused and smiled. "Huading is beautiful, I like it very much." Zhou Yu's eyes became extremely hot in an instant. He smiled gently and nodded, "I see." Through the cabin window, he looked at the brilliant lights outside the airport. After a moment of silence, he said softly, "I like it here very much too." Li Tianlan nodded, "I'll go to Yuzhou as soon as I finish some things in Tianan. If possible, I'll give you some support." Zhou Yu's heart suddenly jumped. He took a deep breath and said yes. Joining the new group was not only because the binding of interest between them and military counselor had become unbreakable, but also from the perspective of the North Group, the new group had a promising future. Not to mention that Zhou Yunhai had more expectations for him, even Zhou Yu himself had more expectations for himself. He was already the mayor of Huading. Further, a senator. Further, a director. In recent years, the declining North Group could barely maintain a director's position, and its ranking was getting lower and lower. But the new group was different. The combination of Wu Jingmin and Bai Qingqian had stabilized the framework of the new group. 5 years later, Zhou Yuanshan of Xianxia had the qualification to soar. Whether it was the new group or the giant group, Zhou Yuanshan would be the #1 figure in Zhongzhou state that they would promote. Maybe 10 years later, maybe 15 years later. At that time, Emperor Dong's palace would be unparalleled, and it was almost impossible for Zhou Yuanshan to encounter any strong competitors. Although Zhou Yu was a few years older than Zhou Yuanshan, to put it more exaggeratedly, even after 20 years, he was still relatively young and vigorous in his current level. He could completely keep up with Zhou Yuanshan's pace. As long as he could get the approval of Emperor Dong's palace, when Zhou Yuanshan took over, there would inevitably be a position for him among the directors around him. And it would be a position of absolute power. Now the opportunity was in front of him. If he could settle Zhong Yongming in Huading and satisfy Li Tianlan, then in the future, Li Tianlan would certainly satisfy him. At this moment, his thoughts were the same as Gu Xianyan outside the cabin. This trip was not in vain. Zhou Yu thought of the upcoming decisive battle in Beihai. He thought of a series of possible situations after the decisive battle. This was an opportunity for the new group to expand rapidly. It was also an opportunity for him. Zhou Yu made up his mind. He looked at Li Tianlan and said seriously, "Your Majesty, at the end of the year, I will invite Mayor Ning of Xianyuan City to Huading for an exchange." Li Tianlan's eyes lit up. Ning Qianqing was the mayor of Xianyuan City. In Xianyuan City, without a speaker, the mayor was the top leader, and the chief administrative officer in Xianyuan City was similar to the mayor of Huading. Normally, only the top leader of Huading could invite the top leader of Xianyuan City to Huading for an exchange. This completely showed Zhou Yu's confidence. Very good. He nodded and laughed. The phone suddenly rang. Han Xinyan picked up the phone, walked aside and whispered, "Hello." Less than a minute after she left, she walked back quickly and stood beside Li Tianlan, a little hesitant. Zhou Yu subconsciously wanted to get up and leave. Li Tianlan waved his hand and said calmly, "There are no outsiders. Just say it." Han Xinyan hesitated a little, nodded and whispered, "Your Majesty, there is news from the sanatorium in Yuzhou." She paused and whispered, "Li Shi just woke up. She wants to meet you." Chapter 922. Within a short period of time after he woke up, the sanatorium was bustling with activity. This sanatorium was the property of the giant group. In the past, it received some retired elderly or wounded people in the group. In more than 2 years, batches of the most advanced medical equipment were continuously sent to the hospital. The hospital was also constantly introducing talents, organizing exchanges, and learning experiences. At present, this sanatorium, which had no specific name and was not open to the public, could be said to be the world's top level in terms of hardware equipment and medical technology. Siduzangyue, Wei Kunlun, Gong Sun Qi, Li Wangxing, Tribulation, Dongqing Rushi, Li Shi, all of the people with great backgrounds had stayed here before. 2 years had passed. The wounded people who came out of the chaos that swept the whole dark world left the sanatorium one by one. Tribulation and Dongqing Rushi were transferred to Tianan. Wei Kunlun still stayed here to hold the fort. But in the sanatorium, Li Shi was the only seriously injured person who was really important and seriously injured. So the whole sanatorium seemed to be in an uproar as soon as she woke up. Wei Kunlun was the first to walk into the ward. Then came the director, the deputy director, the directors, the attending physicians, the head nurse. A group of people came in one after another in a mess. Until he saw Li Shi frowning obviously, Wei Kunlun spoke slowly, motioned several attending physicians to stay, and sent the others out. After some simple examinations, it was confirmed that Li Shi's body was still very weak, but it was normal. At Li Shi's strong request, she took a bath with the help of the nurse and simply ate something light. The doctor brought a bottle for her, which was some medicine that could help her recover quickly. Li Shi was silent and let the doctor do his work. Wei Kunlun stood aside, like a shadow, watching all this quietly. After more than an hour of busy work, when the doctor with a relaxed and optimistic expression left the ward, Li Shi, who seemed to be silent most of the time, finally raised her head and glanced at Wei Kunlun. "Madam, although I know you may know me, I still want to introduce myself. I am Wei Kunlun, the current deputy palace master of Emperor Dong's palace, codenamed Saint." This sentence contained a slow amount of information from beginning to end. Li Shi, who had been in a coma for 2 years, obviously did not wake up, so she was silent for a long time. He called himself Madam. Emperor Dong's palace. She tried hard to digest the information, but her brain was muddled. It seemed that she had a headache because of thinking. She hesitated and finally asked softly, "Emperor Dong's palace?" "His Majesty Li Tianlan's East Palace." Saint said calmly, "Li Tianlan, Your Majesty." Muttering to herself, she repeated a lot of information that was hard to digest. She had no idea how to react. After some time, she shook her head hard and rubbed her forehead as if she had a headache. "How long have I been unconscious?" "A little more than 2 years." Saint sounded calm. 2 years. After a long silence, Li Shi took a deep breath. "Huh." She let out an inexplicable sigh. No one knew what she was thinking. She subconsciously said, "Li Tianlan is already His Majesty?" Perhaps not many people agree with this title, but I think they will change their minds soon. Wei Kunlun said. Li Shi was still a little confused and said silently, "What about Kunlun City? It's in a precarious situation and can't even protect itself." "Madam, do you care about Kunlun City very much?" The term lady again. Li Shi had many titles in her life, but it seemed that no one had ever called her that. She glanced at Wei Kunlun. The coldness and indifference before the coma seemed to gradually recover in her, but the recovery was not fast, so she looked a little dull. "You call me lady?" she asked. Kunlun City looked at her silently for a while and laughed. "Otherwise, what should I call you? Or, you don't like this title?" Li Shi was silent. Many years ago, when she was in the Li family, she was the young madam. In Kunlun City, she was the madam. In the eyes of others, she was Her Highness. In the eyes of Gu Xingyun, she also had many titles. Bitch, bitch. She recalled the past scenes and carefully tasted the title lady. It was a very simple title, but with a sense of freedom. She thought for a moment. "I like it very much." Saint did not call her madam. This title meant her status in Kunlun City. Similarly, for East Palace, it also meant that she was an enemy. Saint did not call her Her Highness either. Although she was at the peak of the invincible realm, in a very long time, she was destined to be difficult to recover her former strength. There was respect in the title, Lady, and it also implied that the other party seemed to be free. Lady, She sat quietly and gradually smiled. 2 years of coma had not brought the slightest change to her appearance. That kind of pure beauty was still the same. She was a little weak and haggard. Now she looked extremely delicate and beautiful. Before the master left, he said something beside your bed. He said to you, and I think he said it to me. He said that although he was no longer young, he hoped that you could still have a chance to choose in your life. He hoped that you could let go of the shackles of sin and be truly free to pursue something very beautiful, master. Saint did not say who he was. But Shi naturally knew which master he was talking about. Few people in Zhongzhou state knew that Xianxia, the metaphysics grand master who had shocked countless people and even won considerable respect in the Wang family of Beihai, was her biological father. Shi's body slowly softened. She lay on the bed and looked at the ceiling illuminated by the light in the ward. After a long time, she whispered, "Where did he go?" "I don't know." Saint was silent for a while. "Although I have no evidence, it seems that all kinds of signs show that after the master left here, he went to the desert prison. At that time, His Majesty Li Tianlan was there, but His Majesty did not see him, and no one saw him come out of the desert. I think the master should have died." "Why?" Shi's voice was a little indifferent. It seemed that because she had experienced too much, her mood was a little numb, and there was no fluctuation in her tone. "I don't know what he did. Maybe he did nothing. Maybe he did a lot of things," Saint shook his head. "But I don't think you will see each other again in the future." "Huh." With incomparably repressed emotions, Shi laughed softly. "I don't know how to feel," she said softly. "I should be sad, right?" Saint was silent and did not speak. Shi looked at the ceiling for a long time and whispered, "If possible, I hope to see Li Tianlan. His Majesty. Right here, can you ask him to come?" Saint nodded and took out his mobile phone. "I'll report now." Chapter 923. After the phone call, Saint did not say anything more. He just said that His Majesty was in Huading and would come over soon. Then he left Shi's ward. With Shi's awakening, whether she would leave or stay was not what Saint cared about the most. After sitting in the sanatorium for nearly 2 years, he was a little tired of it. With Shi's awakening, his task was almost completed. The deputy palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace was in charge of Tianen. He took some time to complete the handover with the military counselor. With the military counselor's assistance, he was in charge of the intelligence and secret forces of Emperor Dong's palace. This was the future he was looking forward to more than staying in the sanatorium. He walked out of the ward and closed the door. The moment the door closed, he peeked into the ward through the gap. In his sight, Shi sat up, reached out to hold her knees, and quietly looked at the night outside the window. No one knew what she was thinking. Saint shook his head and smiled. The door closed, and the whole world seemed to become quiet. The night outside the window was quiet and deep. Although it was cold in winter, there was no wind, frost, rain, or snow tonight. The street lights in the sanatorium were lit, blending with the moonlight and reflecting light in the night. It was quiet, gentle, and spacious. Everything in his line of sight was like an oil painting that had been completely frozen in darkness. It was slightly heavy, yet it carried a wisp of indescribable lightness. Shi sat on the bed in a daze, looking out of the window. It seemed that she had not completely woken up from the coma of more than 2 years. She was a little confused, and there seemed to be 2 personalities in her mind. One was recalling in a mess, while the other was thinking in a daze. The pictures of the first decades of her life kept flashing in her mind. They were not in a coherent world but were unconstrained. They were about her father, her daughter, Kunlun City, the Li family, countless scenes, countless smiling faces, and countless mockery. Wind and rain, ups and downs. Perhaps they were all very interesting stories. There were those who endured humiliation, those who were overcome with emotion, those who were at a loss, those who were in high spirits, and those who were completely disheartened. The images that flashed in his mind began to arrange themselves in order. Li Shi thought quietly, recalling her life. She did not lose her memory, but she remembered many things. In her memories, she looked at the people who played an important role in her life, but she could not find her place. Muddle-headed, a walking corpse, what have I been doing all these years? Or what did he do? The past was like the wind, but the memories were like the tide. Her thoughts had only just begun, and the endless past had already completely drowned her in the next moment. She saw Gu Xingyun and the Gu clan who had endured in the past. He saw the arrogant Li Guangtu of the past. He saw Wang Tianzong, who used to be silent and a little dull. He saw Li Honghe, who stood at the peak and protected Zhongzhou state and the Li family wholeheartedly. Every single one of them was vivid in his memory. Everyone has a meaning. What about himself? He had lived for more than 50 years. Apart from becoming a tool used by others to achieve some conspiracy, what meaning did his life have? Perhaps the answer to this question had already been found after the case of treason. More than 20 years passed quickly. Until today, Li Shi finally determined that the only meaning of her life might be to pierce the man's chest with her sword. Countless laughter, happiness, longing, expectations, and promises had all turned into bubbles along with that sword strike. Fresh blood flowed down from the blade. He collapsed, laughing wildly. Everything after that, until now, was a paleness that she did not want to recall. Li Shi took a breath gently. She seemed to feel a little cold, and subconsciously held herself tighter. Your emotions are a little confused. She didn't know how much time had passed. In the extremely quiet room, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded in Li Shi's ears. Li Shi, who had been completely immersed in her memories, suddenly shook and raised her head subconsciously. Li Tianlan stood by the bed and looked into her eyes. His expression was calm. How do you feel? Li Shi looked at him in a daze. After a while, she shook her head and said, I'm fine, but not very good. It will take some time. Li Tianlan nodded and did not choose to sit down. He just said in a calm voice, Go ahead. He stood by the bed, motionless. The black windbreaker wrapped his body, and the complicated golden lines on the windbreaker shone softly and slightly under the light, but every ray of light was like the sharpest sword light. Li Shi quietly felt the aura, laughed at herself, and whispered, I know the East Emperor Palace, but the East Emperor Palace has become the East Emperor Palace. Now you are really qualified to be called Your Majesty. Li Tianlan did not speak. How is she? After a moment of silence, Li Shi continued to ask. This question was a bit abrupt. But Li Tianlan could basically be sure who she was talking about. Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. You care. Li Shi hugged her body tightly and leaned against the corner of the wall. Such a posture might look a little delicate and pitiful on others, but on her, it was a kind of lifeless sadness. Do you want to say that I don't deserve it? Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. His expression was still calm, but his voice became a little cold and hard. She will be fine. Thank you. Li Shi whispered. No, forget it. Li Tianlan nodded. If there's nothing else, I'm leaving. I thought you would have something to ask me. Li Shi laughed at herself again. Do you already know, or ask you what? Li Tianlan looked at Li Shi quietly. Ask if you are my mother? Li Shi's palm suddenly clenched and she seemed a little nervous. Am I? What do you think? Li Tianlan laughed. Li Shi stared at Li Tianlan's eyes in silence. There was a smile in her eyes, but there was no emotion in her smile. Yes and no. She whispered. Li Tianlan nodded and said yes. When did you know? Li Shi asked. After the chaos was over. When I returned to Yuzhou, I asked a lot of people about Mormons, but it doesn't matter. I don't know anything and I don't want to know. It doesn't matter. Escape. Li Shi's eyes were a little deep. Refuse to forgive them, or you think too much. Li Tianlan smiled. I don't hate anyone, let alone forgive them. I don't want to know, and they don't seem to want me to know. Things have come to this point, but there is no need to point it out. It's good to know. I have suffered a lot since I was a child, but Grandpa is very good to me. I have no resentment in my heart, not at all. Moreover, some things don't need to be changed. Whether my surname is Li or Dongqing. He was silent for a while and said faintly, "We are all together. We are all a family. What's the difference?" Li Shi lowered her head silently. Li Tianlan waited for a while. Just when he wanted to leave again, Li Shi spoke, but it was a topic that had nothing to do with his life experience. "In fact, I think I really liked Gu Xingyun, even loved him," she said softly, and her voice was like a dream. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. "So maybe I'm really a fickle woman. My father wanted to be in power at that time. Things like fate really exist. He could see the strong fate of the Gu family at that time. According to him later, even if there was no treason case, the Li family was doomed to fall. So in the days when the Gu family was humble, I was sent to Kunlun City by him. At that time, Gu Xingyun was not like now." She thought for a while and suddenly found that she had no specific impression of Gu Xingyun over the years. She couldn't help laughing again. At that time he was very simple. Although he had some ambitions, they were in the ordinary category. He didn't have so many resentments later. I think he also liked me at that time. He liked me very much, but later, I appeared beside Li Kuangte. At that time, Li Kuangte didn't have to get me. He just met me occasionally in the Gu family and said I was beautiful with a smile. He didn't even ask my name. But at that time, the Gu family was a dog lying under the Zhuanyuan Tai, wagging its tail and begging for pity. So that night, I was sent to Li Kuangtu's home by Gu Dongqing. Naturally, that night, I went to Li Kuangtu's bed. Although I was reluctant, I couldn't resist. Gu Xingyun resisted, but one of his arms and one of his legs was broken. At that time, Gu Dongqing told me to serve Li Kuangtu well and make him satisfied. Otherwise, he would make Gu Xingyun's life worse than death. Li Tianlan did not speak. He had no impression of Gu Dongqing, but he seemed to have heard of the name. He was the former patriarch of the Gu family and Gu Qianchuan's uncle. When he was the patriarch, Gu Xingyun's branch was not outstanding, and Gu Qianchuan's branch was the orthodox of the Gu family. Li Tianlan thought of the information he got from the Lu family in Huading and the Heshabi, and his imagination ran wild. "Li," she said unhurriedly, "at that time, although I was with Gu Xingyun, my body was very clean." Li Kuangte looked very satisfied, as if he had got a new toy. "At that time, I could be said to have used all my skills to tie him to me." About 4 months later, I walked into Li Kuangtu's circle of friends at that time and met Wang Tianzong, Lin Fengting, and Summer Solstice. A year later, I met Li Honghe, the god of war of Zhongzhou state at that time. The day after I met Li Honghe, I returned to the Gu family by myself. You can't imagine how I felt when Gu Dongqing, who used to be superior to me, bowed to me. I met Gu Xingyun. Gu Dongqing was indeed a good dog. He was afraid that something would happen between me and Gu Xingyun, so he kept a close eye on us throughout the meeting. I made a request to them. I could stay in the Li family, but the Gu family must do their best to cultivate Gu Xingyun. Stay in the Li family. Li Tianlan's tone was inexplicable. I did stay in the Li family. You may not believe it. Li Shi smiled. Her voice was a little sarcastic. Gu Dongqing is really a good dog. He not only wagged his tail and begged for mercy to the Li family, but also had an almost abnormal loyalty. You haven't heard that loyalty is loyalty. At that time, Li Kuangte just said that I was beautiful, and he could send me over that night. If Li Kuangte didn't mean me at that time, but his daughter or his wife, Gu Dongqing could also send them over. In those years, when I stayed with Li Kuangte, her only requirement for me was to serve Li Kuangte well and take care of his daily life. She didn't have any other requirements. The day after I met Senior Li, he could bow to me. Not only me, but you should know that at that time, Sidu Zongyue and Yun Qinshi, the current Phantom Sword Master of Mount Shu, were also Li Kuangtu's women. Gu Dongqing was already an invincible realm expert at that time. When he saw them who were still young, he would also bow to them. In the eyes of others, it was servility. But for the Li family, this kind of loyalty was undoubtedly what the father and son of the Li family liked. So at that time, they almost completely trusted the Gu family. Go on. No one knew what Li Tianlan was thinking about, but he said quietly. In those years, I had been with Li Kuangte. Occasionally, I went to the Gu family and met Gu Xingyun. What happened later? She shook her head and recalled quietly. After Gu Dongqing died and Gu Qingfeng became the patriarch of the Gu family, everything changed. Chapter 924. Li Tianlan was no stranger to the name Gu Qingfeng. He was the patriarch of the Gu clan before Gu Xingyun, the father of Gu Qianquan. It was he who got the imperial jade seal and Heshabi, but he was killed by Lu Tianqing of the Lu family in Huading. Lu Tianqing barely entered the invincible realm in the process of exploring the imperial jade seal. Finally, more than 10 years ago, he fought with Situ Zhongyue in Taibai Mountain. Lu Tianqing was defeated and died. Sai City rose, and the status of the Lu family plummeted. In the end, when facing Li Tianlan, in order to protect himself, he gave the imperial jade seal to him, and he gave the imperial jade seal to Tribulation. Surrounded by an indescribable emotion, Li Tianlan reached out and touched his chin. Gu Qingfeng is disloyal to the Li family? It's not just unfaithful. Li Shi shook her head. It's hatred and resentment. In fact, in the eyes of outsiders, that kind of emotion is normal. Not everyone is willing to be a dog. Although the Li family treated them well, a dog is a dog. Even if they had to stand and eat the leftovers, not many people would be willing to eat meat while kneeling. Li Tianlan looked at Li Shi and asked calmly, "What does Gu Qingfeng want you to do?" Speaking of the past with this mentality, Li Shi's heart was calm and almost numb. He tried to let me control Li Guangtu. Control was a very comprehensive word. Controlling Li Guangtu's whereabouts, controlling some of his plans, controlling some information, influencing his stance, for the Gu family, which was attached to the Li family at that time. If Li Shi could do all this, the benefits to the Gu family were self-evident. "You actually agreed," Li Tianlan said. "Naturally, I won't agree to Gu Qingfeng's request." Li Shi was expressionless. At that time, I was very good with Li Guangtu. He really doted on me. The reason why Situ Zhongyue and Yun Qinshi didn't like me was also because he doted on me. I was with him all year round. Many people in the Li family had begun to call me young madam. Li Guangtu even wanted to marry me. I was the woman that Gu Dongqing gave to Li Guangtu. His purpose was very pure. He wasn't afraid of Gu Qingfeng threatening me. Moreover, he didn't dare to threaten me. At that time, I was almost out of the control of the Gu family. So, Li Tianlan understood. "Is it Gu Xingyun?" Li Shi was silent for a long time before she said, "Yes." I'm not sure whether Gu Dongqing's death had anything to do with Gu Xingyun. But it's obvious that he hated Gu Changqing for giving me to Li Guangtu. Similarly, he hated the Li family as much as he hated Gu Dongqing. Li Shi lowered her head. As Gu Dongqing's goddaughter, I attended his funeral. On the day of the funeral, I saw Gu Xingyun. At that time, he wanted to touch me, but I didn't agree. I don't know whether I was afraid or unwilling. Even now, I don't know my mood at that time. Gu Xingyun was very angry at that time. He said that he would destroy the Li family and kill Li Guangtu completely. He said that I was his and said a lot. He hoped that I could help him. "And then you began to betray everything about Li Guangtu?" Li Tianlan asked. This time, Li Shi hesitated for a longer time. She seemed to be recalling something, but there was some confusion in her eyes. After a long time, she whispered, "I don't know." "Not sure?" Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. "I don't remember." Li Shi whispered, "I still remember all the details of besieging Li Guangtu that year, but it was only that battle. Before that, I don't know whether I had betrayed Li Guangtu or the Li family." She frowned tightly, and there was an unconcealable pain in her cold and indifferent eyes. "No, I should have done it once." At that time, Senior Li and Li Guangtu had a fierce fight. At that time, he had just entered the invincible realm. The old patriarch of Beihai died. It seemed that because of this, Senior Li told him not to set his eyes on the Wang family of Beihai. She frowned tightly and looked more and more painful. Li Guangtu. At that time, he said that the Wang family of Beihai was no longer worthy of their status, and this was an opportunity for the Li family. Senior Li said that the Li family couldn't do it either. It seemed that there was something inside Beihai. At that time, The Li family couldn't stop it at all. Li Guangdu said that he wanted to see it. I don't remember. Later, I should have told this news to Gu Xingyun. I seem to remember this thing, but I don't remember doing it. She remembered that she had told this news to Gu Xingyun, but she didn't remember doing it herself. Such a contradictory sentence made Li Tianlan's eyes become extremely deep in an instant. Li Shi shook her head fiercely and glanced at Li Tianlan. You should know what's going on. You've been hypnotized. Li Tianlan said calmly, or at least someone has secretly imposed a very serious psychological suggestion on you. It can make you do something in a sober state, but it won't let you remember what you have done. Obviously, there is at least one real master in the spiritual field in Kunlun City, and it is very likely that it is Gu Xingyun himself. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and whispered, "It's really deep to hide." Maybe. Li Shi murmured to herself. In fact, at that time, the Gu family had already secretly planned to take action against Li Guangdu, but it was just a plan, and there was no breakthrough. However, after knowing Li Guangdu's ambition, the Gu family confirmed the plan and let some hidden pawns take action to provoke the relationship between the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai. During that time, Senior Li was very busy. Li Guangdu was arrogant and disdained to explain those provocations on the surface. Sometimes, in order to test the attitude of some forces of the Li family in the Southeast Group, he even chose to acquiesce. The plan went very smoothly. Before they were sure to take action, Summer Solstice took the initiative to find Gu Xingyun. Gu Xingyun and several Invincible Realm experts took dozens of Thundershocking Realm experts to besiege Li Guangdu. Summer Solstice took action at the most appropriate time. When the murderous weapon of the Li family was about to fire, she destroyed the infinite sky and seriously injured Li Guangdu. That sneak attack could be said to be a lose-lose situation. Summer Solstice's injury has not even healed yet, and Li Guangdu, who was also seriously injured, was completely crazy at that time. In fact, with his strength at that time, if he wanted to escape, he had a chance, but he lost his mind and completely wanted to take everyone with him. Li Shi smiled bitterly. So I appeared in front of him and pierced his heart with a sword. I remember all the scenes of that battle very clearly. The Gu family stole my newborn child and threatened me with the lives of the child and my father to kill Li Guangdu. I was really shaken at that time. Maybe the Gu family magnified the psychological suggestion in my heart at the moment I was shaken and gave me enough reasons. In fact, when I took that sword, I regretted it. When I was in the air, I cried. Li Guangdu also saw me and hesitated for a moment. In less than a second, the treason case happened, and the Li family ended. The Gu family stole your child? Li Tianlan asked. It's my daughter. Li Shi's eyes were a little dazed. My daughter and Li Guangdu's were in the Yuzhou military headquarters hospital at that time. It was the hospital with the best conditions at that time. In terms of obstetrics and gynecology, there were more authoritative doctors. She raised her head and took a deep look at Li Guangdu. So, at that time, many pregnant women with status would choose to give birth there. I was like this. She hesitated for a moment and said in a voice without any emotion, so was by Xianxia. Li Tianlan was expressionless and did not move. The situation at that time was actually very tense. A few days after the treason case, Senior Li left Yuzhou and went to Beihai. At that time, the Li family and Beihai had almost completely turned against each other. Senior Li seemed to want to save something. I was a pregnant woman, and there were not many people taking care of me. They were several female experts of the Li family. At that time, no one thought that there would be any problem. After all, the Li family had not fallen yet. Who dared to hurt me? But the accident happened. Gu Xingyun sneaked into the hospital in person. At that time, he thought that there were no big shots in the hospital. No one could find him. Oh, no one found him at that time, but there were still big shots. At that time, Dongcheng Hongguang, the minister of the military headquarters, was in the hospital. Because on the same day that I gave birth to my daughter, Bai Qingqian also gave birth to a son for the Dongcheng family. They were born on the same day in the same month of the same year. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and did not speak. I was a little weak after delivery. Because of the anesthesia, it was difficult for me to move, so I was not very clear about a lot of things. But in the process of cleaning up after the baby was born, it was said that a soldier rushed in directly, laughed and called him godson, and took my daughter away. When the nurse found out that she had taken the wrong person and chased out, Gu Xingyun walked in. At that time, there were 2 babies, a boy and a girl, in the room. One was a child of the Dongqing family and the other, Li Shi smiled. He knew that I gave birth to a daughter, so he didn't touch the boy, but took away the girl who was also just born, and me. When the Dongqing family found out that the soldier had taken the wrong child and took the child that really belonged to their family back, they found that the mother of the girl they had been holding, that is, me, had disappeared. Li Tianlan's mouth twitched, and he said in a low voice, "Who was the person who took your daughter out at that time?" "Thunder God of the Dongqing family." Li Shi said. Li Tianlan remembered Thunder God, who had accompanied him in the desert prison for more than a year, and he didn't know what to say for a while. Later, the treason case broke out. The Dongqing family didn't give the child to Li Honghe until he came back. But I don't know why the granddaughter of the Li family became the grandson, and the grandson of the Dongqing family became the granddaughter. She looked up at Li Tianlan and suddenly said, "Do you think it was intentional or unintentional?" I heard that soon after, Bai Qingqian and Dongqing Wudi completely fell out. Although they didn't divorce, they basically broke up with the Dongqing family. They haven't returned to the Dongqing family for nearly 20 years. It wasn't until you appeared that they got back together? Li Tianlan stared at her silently. After a long while, he said, "Oh." His expression was calm, and his tone was neither salty nor light. "You really don't care about these things." Li Shi smiled. "It doesn't make any sense." Li Tianlan said calmly. "Maybe." Li Shi answered absent-mindedly. "After the case of treason, they forced me to kill the child who was mistakenly adopted. You probably know what happened next. I returned to Kunlun City and gave birth to Qingqing for Gu Xingyun. So many years have passed in a flash. Sometimes Gu Xingyun may be right. I'm really a bitch. I'm a fickle woman who likes the new and dislikes the old. I liked Gu Xingyun, but eventually fell in love with Li Kuangtu, but I gave birth to a daughter for Gu Xingyun." Her voice gradually became lower. "If I could have made different choices at the beginning, it would have been great. Now I have." Li Tianlan said calmly. Li Shi's body trembled slightly, and she didn't speak for a long time. "If you need any help, just tell me." Li Tianlan smiled. "As you just said, you are not my mother, but you are my mother. Although no one is willing to admit this, I am still willing to help you do something." Li Shi was silent for a long time. "I have 2 daughters," she said softly with a trembling voice. "One is by your side, and the other, I hope you can take her out and let her leave Kunlun City. You are His Majesty. You can do it." "Anything else?" Li Tianlan asked. "It's not easy." Li Shi looked at him, and her voice was pleading. Li Tianlan thought of the psychological hint on Li Shi and nodded. "Anything else?" Li Shi shook her head and whispered, "No. After this matter, if you don't mind, leave a place for me in Emperor Dong's palace." Divine Emperor of 9 Heavens. Chapter 925. Li Tianlan could not refuse Li Shi's request, let alone her request. She asked him to bring Li Qingqing back from Kunlun City. She asked for a place in Emperor Dong's palace. Li Shi's recovery period was destined to be long, but the damage to her foundation was not very thorough. She might not be able to return to the peak of the invincible realm in this life, but there was no problem for her to re-enter the invincible realm. Even if she really could not restore her original strength, her vision was still there. As long as she re-entered the invincible realm, she would definitely be an expert who could not be ignored among the experts in the same realm. Such a person joining the Emperor Dong's palace would undoubtedly further enhance the strength of the Emperor Dong's palace. Li Shi knew what he wanted. Li Tianlan knew what Li Shi wanted. Therefore, Emperor Dong's palace could get her help, but it would not restrict her. Li Tianlan could totally afford a leisurely but transcendent position, as long as he could take Li Qingqing away from Kunlun City. There was no room for Li Tianlan to refuse. Even if it was not for the sake of Li Shi, for the sake of Dongqing Rushi, he had to do this. just as he said to Li Shi. Li Shi was indeed not his mother. But if he married Dongqing Rushi, if Li Shi was not his mother, what was she? He took 2 steps in the room and suddenly said, "How did Kunlun City control Li Qingqing?" "Use poison." Li Shi's voice was a little sad. "That is a kind of poison that suppresses vitality. Qingqing's martial arts talent is actually very good, but under the influence of that poison, it is difficult for her to enter the thunder-shocking realm in this life. I used to know that Gu Xingyun used poison. Now, there should be some spiritual hints. Does she know?" Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. "Not sure." Li Shi said, "Gu Xingyun will not tell her, and I dare not tell her." Suppressing vitality, Li Tianlan muttered to himself. Kunlun City has its own secret laboratory, one of which specializes in studying this toxin. Up to now, this toxin has been very mature and has been updated for many generations. This toxin is widely used in Kunlun City and is commonly used in Phoenix Pavilion. Phoenix Pavilion, Li Tianlan suddenly raised his head. This was also a name that he was extremely familiar with. The first time he heard this name was in East Island, and he heard it from Jiang Shangyu. "Tell me about the Phoenix Pavilion." Li Tianlan looked at Li Shi and said slowly, "It's a female organization controlled by Kunlun City. It's responsible for a wide range of areas, including female killers, female spies, female stars, female officials, and female tycoons. Most of them target them with beauty." She frowned and didn't go on, but Li Tianlan had obviously understood what she meant. "How many people does the Phoenix Pavilion have?" Li Tianlan asked. "There are about 600 formal members. Their average age is 23 years old, and their appearance and temperament are the best. They have also been secretly developing for many years. They are the most professional teachers in the Phoenix Pavilion, including etiquette, dance, music, finance, politics, and even bed techniques. In all fields, as long as you want to learn, there will be people to teach you. Almost all the people who come out of the Phoenix Pavilion are mistresses that men dream of. Gu Xingyun uses his own channels to send these young and beautiful women to their targets and give them the life they want. In return, they will use their men to help Kunlun City in some aspects, which is mutually beneficial. For example, you can probably understand the quality of the Phoenix Pavilion. There is now a thunder-shocking realm assassin named Du Hanin in Emperor Dong's palace. She was once targeted by Gu Xingyun and intended to be the target of Phoenix Pavilion. In the evaluation of the Phoenix Pavilion, Du Hanin's evaluation level is A, not only because of her appearance, but also because she has the wind vein. Because she has the wind meridian, she has an extra level. If it's just her appearance, she's probably B+. Li Tianlan was speechless for a while. He naturally knew Du Hanin. She was a beauty, a great beauty. During the period when she was most powerless to protect herself, in order to stay in the Sky Academy, she completely gave up her body, so she also made countless male students in the Sky Academy bleed. Li Tianlan had seen many beautiful women. However, if only in terms of appearance, Du Hanin could definitely be ranked in the top. Such a person was only A in the evaluation of the Phoenix Pavilion? Oh, if only in terms of appearance, it was only B+. He thought about it and asked, "The highest level in the Phoenix Pavilion is A?" "The highest level is X, then S, A and B. The lowest level is B." Li Shi's voice was calm. Li Tianlan couldn't help laughing. "Du Hanin's appearance is only B+? I'm very curious. Who is the X level? What kind of woman can be the X that Gu Xingyun envisioned?" Li Shi's voice was still calm. "Qin Weibai is X." Li Tianlan paused, raised his head, and looked at Li Shi. The room seemed to become silent in an instant. Endless sword energy surged and boiled in absolute silence, completely enveloping Li Shi's body in an instant. Li Tianlan's arm hung down. His palm gradually glowed and became colorful. The incomparably gorgeous luster flowed in his palm, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a startling scarlet. Li Tianlan looked at Li Shi, expressionless. "I'm willing to respect you, but only if you deserve my respect." "Nonsense, do you want to die?" Li Shi felt the sword energy around her almost pointing at every vital part of her body. Her eyes subconsciously stared at Li Tianlan's palm. The scarlet light kept shrinking and shrinking. In the light, she felt a kind of pure sword energy full of destruction. Her body trembled instinctively under the huge threat, but her heart and voice were still calm and shocked. Phoenix Pavilion will put every qualified target on the list, but it doesn't mean that they are people of Phoenix Pavilion. If they are on the list, it means that Kunlun City wants to target these people, but it hasn't found a chance. I don't want to anger you, but I can say responsibly that Qin Weibai is indeed on that list, and she is the only X. Although she is not in Phoenix Pavilion, as long as there is a chance, Gu Xingyun will definitely get her to Phoenix Pavilion at all costs. Below the X level is the S level. At present, there are more than 10 people on the S level list in Phoenix Pavilion, but only 3 really belong to Phoenix Pavilion. The first is me, the second is Qingqing, and the third is a girl who joined Phoenix Pavilion a few years ago, named Gu Xianyan. In addition, Wang Yuetong and Nalan Shuriying of Beihai, Sitsang of Sai City, Flaming Fire of Samsara Palace, King Tong of the Rothschild family, Dongqing Rushi of the Dongqing clan. They are all on that list, and they are the targets that Gu Xingyun wants to target. As for the A level, Phoenix Pavilion currently has 30 people, and the candidate list is longer. Tell me who you know. Your secretary Han Xinyan and your sister Dongqing Qiuqi are on the A-level candidate list of Phoenix Pavilion. Li Tianlan laughed. The infinite sword intent slowly converged, and his anger began to fade, but his eyes gradually carried a trace of extremely dangerous and cold aura. This list is authoritative enough. His voice was gentle and soothing. Who gave him the guts to make such a list of candidates? Who gave him the courage? It's just a list. At least so far, Kunlun City hasn't done anything to the people on the list. Li Shi said. Li Tianlan sneered. That was a load of crap. Anyone on the list could be involved in a behemoth, and some even had the peak individual strength, such as Situ Tsangyue and Flaming Fire. However, with the current strength of Kunlun City, Gu Xingyun might not even be a match for Flaming Fire. If they were on the list, Gu Xingyun would at most think about it. If this was his ambition, it would be too wild. However, he dared to make this list, which was already a capital offense in Li Tianlan's eyes. I don't want to provoke you by saying this. You should be very clear that you can kill Gu Qianchuan, but you can't touch Gu Xingyun now. It's not the time yet. You help me bring Qingqing back, and I will do my best to help you destroy Kunlun City little by little. Li Shi whispered. Li Tianlan stood where he was and took a deep breath. All the irritation and ferocity in his heart were suppressed by him. If this is a deal, Li Tianlan said calmly, deal? The light in the ward slowly fell. Under the light, Li Tianlan's figure became illusory, blurred, false, and finally completely void. Li Shi sat on the bed, motionless. As early as in Mormons, from the moment he stood beside Li Guangtu, she completely betrayed Kunlun City. She entered the Li family from Kunlun City and finally betrayed the Li family. She returned to Kunlun City from the Li family and finally betrayed Kunlun City. Li Shi smiled. At this time, she did not have any burden in her heart, but felt a little ironic. In the past many years, except when she was affected by psychological suggestion, every time Gu Xingyun pressed on her, every time he slapped her, and every insult fell into her ears, she thought of the same thing. One day, she would let Gu Xingyun die a horrible death. She used to love him. But later, she fell in love with Li Guangtu. Her feelings for Gu Xingyun gradually turned into hatred. Naked, crazy, extreme, and hysterical. Her father, who sent her to Kunlun City that year, had left. As long as her daughter could get rid of the poison and return to her side, she would be free. Li Shi trembled and took a deep breath. Her heart was full of comfort. Once again, she clearly smelled the taste of freedom. It was so strange and so beautiful. When Li Tianlan came back, she could probably live for herself for the rest of her life. At this moment, she suddenly thought of her father's words. At that time, Xianxia predicted that the Gu family would rise in Zhongzhou state and replace the Li family, so he sent her to Kunlun City. But the Gu family did not replace the Li family by the Gu family. In the future that Xianxia saw, the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family would completely fall out. After both sides suffered losses, the Gu family would take advantage of the situation to rise. Gu Qingfeng and Gu Qianchuan would enter the invincible realm. Gu Xingyun and Li Shi could reach the peak of the invincible realm. And the next generation, Gu Hanshan, who had the heavenly king heart, also meant an absolutely beautiful future for Kunlun City. Such a lineup was already the top superpower in the Dark World. However, all of this had changed the moment she was sent to Li Kuangtu's side. What was even more ridiculous was that Kunlun City did not know that it had changed its beautiful future and embarked on a road that was doomed to be irreversible. Li Shi moved her body, lay on the bed and closed her eyes. The window seemed to shake for a moment. The space over the entire sanatorium suddenly twisted. A colorful sword light went up against the sky in an instant and went straight into the sky. In the sanatorium, Saint, who was chatting with Han Xinyan, suddenly raised his head. In his sight, the majestic and wanton sword light kept going up. It was like a rainbow crossing the sky. The abundant and sharp sword light illuminated the night sky of Yuzhou City, went farther and farther, and flew straight to the northwest. That was the direction of Kunlun City. Chapter 926. After dealing with the documents, Li Huaqing stood up from his desk. Just as he was about to eat something and rest, his secretary, Ma Si, knocked on his office door. Li Huaqing smiled at him and said, "That's all for today. Time to get off work." Ma Si also nodded with a smile and whispered, "I just received a call from Minister Dongqing." Madame Li Shi woke up. Li Huaqing, who was already thinking about what to eat, paused for a moment and sat back at his desk. "Is Li Shi awake?" Murmuring to himself, he subconsciously tapped the table with his fingers. He was deep in thought. The sanatorium of the giant group was extremely closed. If there was no killing intent in such a place, there was no need to infiltrate his own people. Any invincible realm expert was the core combat capability in any country, and it could even be said to be the core trump card. No matter what Li Shi's identity was, her strength at the peak of the invincible realm was there. No one said anything when she was in a coma. But once she woke up, the sanatorium would definitely report it to its superior immediately, and finally, it would be conveyed to him. It should have been a few hours ago. Ma Si lowered her voice and said in a complicated tone, "Li Tianlan didn't hide his whereabouts. He came directly to Yuzhou from Huading and entered the sanatorium. He should have come to see Li Shi. But at that time, the news of Li Shi didn't come out, so we didn't know what he was doing in Yuzhou." Li Huaqing remained silent. In just a few hours, the news that Li Tianlan had killed the killer of the invincible realm with one blow in Huading had quickly spread throughout the Dark World. First, Gu Qianchuan, then Zhu. The two invincible realm experts were both killed by Li Tianlan with one blow. Li Tianlan was completely building his reputation as the East Emperor with bloody military exploits. When the news came out, Prime Minister Chen Fangqin called him. Li Huaqing didn't answer it as he couldn't see the undercurrent aroused by this news for the time being. However, according to the report of a director of Wuxia, Wang Qinglei had already arrived at Yuzhou province the moment he received the news. At this moment, the entire Dark World must have fallen into chaos. 13th floor. Dong Huang, Shenyuan Feng, Li Tianlan. No matter what it was, no matter what the outside world thought of him, he was proving one thing to the outside world. There was no solution. Li Tianlan was at a loss. In this current era, he was truly an invincible existence. The death of Gu Qianchuan and Li Zhu might not fully explain this, but Beihai, which was on the verge of breaking out, was destined to be the stage where Li Tianlan really ascended to the throne. At times like this, Li Huaqing sighed and whispered, "What can he say to Li Shi when he comes to Yuzhou? Let her join Emperor Dong's palace." Ma Si thought for a moment and said, "In the past 2 years, Emperor Dong's palace and Kunlun City's attitude toward Li Shi has been very strange. Moreover, when she was in Mormons, she stood with Li Kuangtu and Lin Fengtu. I think no matter what His Highness Gu Xingyun ordered her, he would not give her such an order. It's very interesting that after the end of Mormons, I collected information about Kunlun City. All kinds of signs show that in that chaos, Kunlun City sent not only Li Shi to Snow Country, but also a quite elite team of experts. But from the beginning to the end of the chaos, the elite team of Kunlun City did not appear. Only Li Shi appeared, and she stood with Li Guangtu. Li Shi has been in a coma in the sanatorium for more than 2 years. Kunlun City doesn't care about her and doesn't even want to take her back. On the contrary, Emperor Dong's palace is doing its best to treat her, which seems a little strange. You mean, Li Huaqing said lightly, Li Shi betrayed Kunlun City? This is the most reasonable explanation. Ma Si said seriously, it's difficult for an invincible realm expert to be completely in our sight. Even Li Tianlan, the commander-in-chief at that time, we can't fully know what they did. Maybe before the chaos began he and Li Shi had already met and reached some deals, or maybe there are other possibilities. As soon as Li Shi woke up, Li Tianlan rushed over as soon as possible, which is enough to explain the problem. At least it shows that Li Tianlan is very sure to let Li Shi join Emperor Dong's palace. It makes sense. Li Huaqing nodded and smiled, feeling a little strange. He said, why not the Purgatory of Heaven capital? Ma Si's expression froze slightly and she said hesitantly, it shouldn't be possible. In fact, we don't need to guess too much. Let's call the young His Majesty and ask him directly. Li Huaqing laughed. That's right. Ma Si smiled and took out her mobile phone. The mobile phone vibrated. Almost at the same time, the ringing sound came from Ma Si's and Li Huaqing's mobile phones. That was a message push. People at their level naturally wouldn't pay attention to 2 boring things. All the things that could be pushed to their mobile phones were basically important events. What's that? Li Huaqing said, took the mobile phone, and was a little surprised. Celestial phenomenon? Meteor? What's that? A colorful flowing light appeared in the sky over Yuzhou. Strange celestial phenomenon, suspected to be an extraterrestrial meteorite. Looking at the somewhat inexplicable title, Li Huaqing and Ma Si opened the special push software at the same time. A short article and a short video appeared on the screen, which seemed to be reprinted from other media. In the video, an incomparably brilliant light appeared in the sky almost in an instant. The light crossed the night and disappeared in an instant. For a moment, Li Huaqing understood the meaning of the word, suspected, in quotation marks. Almost everyone could see that the ray of light had risen from the surface of the earth to the sky and disappeared in an instant. Number 32 Qinghe Road. Ma Si finished watching the video and read the article. It was clearly written that the light first rose from near number 32 Qinghe Road. His body stiffened, and he looked up at Li Huaqing. The sanatorium. Number 32 Qinghe Road was the address of the sanatorium of the giant group. What? Li Huaqing's tone was a little slow. That light is probably Li Tianlan. Ma Si swallowed, and his tone was a little difficult. Are you kidding me? Li Huaqing said subconsciously. That light was Li Tianlan. This statement was just like telling a fairy tale. Li Huaqing could accept the sword light that went from the central plains through Yanzhou, Dongshan, Yuzhou, Longjiang to Beihai, and then through Suzhou to the desert of Beijiang. Because it was a living murderous weapon. No matter how powerful it was, there would always be a time when its energy was exhausted. But Li Tianlan was a living body of flesh and blood. How could he reach this level? Wang Tianzong of Mormons, Ma Si whispered. He set off from Reki City, crossed all the terrains, and appeared in Mormons. Li Tianlan can't reach that level, but he has Xianyuan phone. Maybe. And the location is too coincidental. Li Tianlan came as soon as Li Shi woke up. This light appeared from the sanatorium and went directly to the northwest. His voice stopped abruptly. All the speculation was meaningless. The most important thing was that the light suspected of Li Tianlan went to the northwest. That was the most terrifying fact. Ma Si glanced at Li Huaqing. Li Huaqing's voice suddenly rose. Call him. The phone was quickly dialed. Ma Si waited for a while, looked at Li Huaqing and shook his head. I can't get through. As soon as Li Shi woke up, the light went to the northwest and went to Kunlun City. Li Huaqing's brain was confused for a moment, and he made a prompt decision. Call the Prime Minister and inform him of the news. In addition, Contact Minister Dongqing Wudi. He was willing to remain neutral now, but it didn't mean that he could let Li Tianlan do whatever he wanted. After all, Gu Xingyun was the god of war of Zhongzhou State and the governor of Kunlun City. In any case, nothing could happen to Gu Xingyun. That was the minimum bottom line. Kunlun City. In the exquisite courtyard that belonged solely to the city lord, the sound of something shattering rang out incessantly. Gu Xingyun listened to the news brought to him by Chen Fangqing patiently. Li Shi woke up. He suspected that Li Tianlan's sword light was already on the way to Kunlun City. Gu Xingyun didn't know what he was thinking in his mind, nor did he know what he had responded. Gu Xingyun trembled all over, and his blood pressure kept rising. With monstrous anger and resentment, he directly smashed the phone against the wall as soon as he hung up the phone. The surging power kept sweeping in the room. Gu Xingyun smashed almost everything that could be smashed in the room. Some high-level officials of Kunlun City rushed over as soon as possible, but they were driven out mercilessly by Gu Xingyun. His eyes were red and he gritted his teeth. Standing in the ruins, he kept cursing, "Bitch! Bitch! How dare you betray me? How dare you betray me? Damn it, bitch, bitch!" With a heavy gasp, his voice echoed in the room like thunder. His expression was ferocious, and he almost completely lost his mind. He liked Li Shi. He liked her, and he still liked her now. He was very sure of that. That was the only woman he had ever loved in his life. He dreamed of being in harmony with her and growing old with her. Even after knowing that Li Shi had given birth to a child for Li Guangtu, he was still willing and wanted to forgive and accept her. He really thought so in his heart. So after the treason case, Gu Xingyun married Li Shi at the first time. But it was not the grand wedding he dreamed of. That wedding was low-key and simple. At that time, Gu Xingyun did not realize what he was avoiding. His married life with Li Shi was simple. At the very beginning, Gu Xingyun felt the ecstasy of regaining what he had lost. But there were also times when the emotions were strong and intense. He soon noticed Li Shi's numbness and the sadness that seemed to penetrate into her bones. For her own fate, and also for Li Guangtu. Gu Xingyun was very angry, but he was also very disappointed. He suppressed the anger in his heart and talked with Li Shi again and again. There was no improvement at all. Li Shi's breath became more and more numb, and she was like a walking corpse all day long. He really liked Li Shi, so he tried to give her some psychological hints. He used this trick to get a lot of information about the Li family, and he also wanted to use this trick to make Li Shi loyal to him. But hypnosis was not omnipotent, not to mention that Li Shi was already in the invincible realm at that time, and her strength was stronger than Gu Xingyun's. His hypnosis had no effect. Gu Xingyun wishfully thought that this was the reason why Li Shi valued Li Guangtu too much. The real situation might be like this. But Gu Xingyun, who was blinded by jealousy, did not think about anything at all. He had seen Li Guangtu and Li Shi under the moonlight many times, watching the two figures snuggling up to each other, watching Li Shi's belly slowly grow bigger, and watching her happy smile grow more and more. Strong jealousy and unwillingness almost distorted his soul. In fact, he felt inferior in his heart. He was not as good as Li Guangtu, far worse. He knew this, but he was unwilling to admit it. He always thought that as long as Li Guangtu died, Li Shi would be his. But what he got was a walking corpse. It was unclear how it started. When he slapped Li Shi's white and tender face for the first time, everything could no longer be reversed. At that time, he caught Xianxia and ordered Li Shi to take off her clothes. Then, in front of Xianxia, he completed the so-called wedding night. Gu Xingyun's heart became more and more distorted, and all his dark thoughts seemed to burst out at that moment. He tortured Li Shi, insulted her, beat her, and scolded her. The next day, looking at her bruised body, he apologized gently, hoping that she could forgive him. But Li Shi never changed. Thus, he became even more irascible, and his attacks became heavier and heavier. He poisoned Xianxia. After Li Qingcheng spoke, he poisoned his daughter. He used all his means to tie Li Shi to his side. Gu Xingyun no longer cared about her heart. He even gradually forgot his own feelings. Seeing Li Shi, he could only. His first thought was to torture her, to keep her by his side, to torture her for the rest of her life. Even if he died, he wanted this woman to be buried with him. Xianxia and Li Qingqing needed him to give them temporary antidotes every once in a while. But Xianxia hadn't looked for him for a long time. So Gu Xingyu knew that Xianxia had most likely fallen in some corner. There was one less trump card that restricted Li Shi. In fact, Gu Xingyu had already had a hunch in his heart. After hearing everything about Mormons, he already had some guesses. Now, after more than 2 years of sleep, she woke up. But she did not return to Kunlun City. She was the first to see Li Tianlan. Then, Li Tianlan came to Kunlun City. It was not until this moment that Gu Xingyu finally realized that so many years of entanglement and torture seemed to have come to an end. He seemed to be really going to lose Li Shi. Completely lose her. So he fell into an unprecedented state of rage. Li Tianlan. He muttered to himself, Li Tianlan, do you think I will be afraid? You want him to kill me? Come on, do you think I will be afraid? If I die, your daughter can't live. No one can King live. Go to hell all of you. He murmured and suddenly turned around. The huge power condensed for a moment. The exquisite courtyard belonging to the city lord was knocked open by Gu Xingyu in an instant. The wall cracked and the stones flew. He rushed out of the courtyard and came to another standalone courtyard. In the courtyard, a beautiful young woman in a red dress was standing at the door, seemingly hesitating. Seeing Gu Xingyu suddenly appear, she was slightly stunned, and then asked cautiously, Dad, are you okay? I'm fine, I'm fine. Gu Xingyun's voice was cold, and he looked at Li Qingqing in front of him. Are you going out? Where do you want to go? Why, Kunlun City can't tolerate you? Li Qingqing's face was a little pale. She looked at Gu Xingyu and could not speak. Get into your room. Gu Xingyun's voice was cold and vicious. Without my permission, you are not allowed to step out of the room. Li Qingqing looked at him speechlessly, a little confused and a little innocent. Gu Xingyu suddenly raised his hand. Slap. He leaned forward and slapped Li Qingqing hard in the face. Li Qingqing's body was directly whipped up, broke the window, fell into her room, and passed out on the spot. Gu Xingyun's expression was complicated. He took a step forward subconsciously, with some pity, some apology, some madness, some ferocity, and countless expressions constantly intertwined on his face. He seemed to want to go in and see his daughter, but finally stood there and sneered. His figure flickered and disappeared in an instant. The next moment, he had appeared in front of the gate of Kunlun City. The night was dark and the sky was full of flying snow. In the flying snow, he sat in front of the city gate, looking in the direction of Yuzhou with a cold expression. As long as Li Tianlan dared to come. He had already made up his mind. As long as Li Tianlan dared to come, he would kill Li Tianlan here at all costs. The wind was cold and the snow was cold. He sat there, waiting silently, like a statue. The night deepened, turning pitch black and becoming silent. The deep darkness slowly passed. The faint light lit up little by little in the flying snow. Dawn was coming. A stream of light suddenly lit up in the distant sky. The rainbow-colored light seemed to carry with it endless light. Dawn broke in the sky. At the moment when day and night alternated, the extremely distant sword light suddenly appeared in front of Gu Xingyu. It was unparalleled brilliance and sharpness. It was high and dazzling. The light pulled a long rainbow that tore the sky 10,000 meters away. The colorful light shone. At dawn, a rainbow as long as 10,000 meters suddenly appeared in front of the snowy Kunlun City. Everyone who saw this scene froze in place and stared blankly at the phenomenon that seemed to have surpassed the power of nature. The rainbow drew an arc in the air, extended toward Kunlun City, and finally landed in front of the gate of Kunlun City. The colorful sword light was stable and bright, like a bridge. Surrounded by endless light, Li Tianlan stood on the rainbow, like a god. He looked at Gu Xingyu sitting on the gate tower with cold and majestic eyes. Gu Xingyu raised his head and looked at him with indifferent and cruel eyes. Gu Xingyu. Li Tianlan spoke faintly. His voice instantly swept the whole Kunlun City with the wind and snow, echoing on the snow-capped peak. Li Yunlin. Gu Xingyun laughed, but there was no smile in his eyes, only endless viciousness and killing intent. What are you doing here? I want a person from you. Li Tianlan said faintly. Gu Xingyun was stunned for a moment. He thought that Li Shi asked Li Tianlan to kill him, but he didn't expect that she just wanted a person. Me? He asked back, suppressed the complex emotions in his heart, and said indifferently, Who do you want? Li Qingqing. His voice was neither high nor low, but it echoed throughout the city. At this moment, standing on the rainbow, he had almost completely integrated with the endless snow-capped peak. Gu Xingyun suddenly fell silent. At this moment, he completely understood Li Shi's plan, and he suddenly laughed. You want Qingqing? Is it possible? Dream on. You're dreaming. Are you still dreaming? You want Qingqing with just you? Impossible. I'll give you 10 minutes. The rainbow in the distance seemed to slowly converge toward Li Tianlan in the sky. Li Tianlan was expressionless. After 10 minutes, if I don't see her, I'll go in and find her myself. How dare you? Gu Xingyun suddenly got up, and his powerful aura soared instantly. In front of the gate of Kunlun City, countless guards rushed over subconsciously, lined up, and looked nervously at Li Tianlan in the air. Li Tianlan's voice was calm and indifferent, without any leeway. Those who stand in my way will die. Chapter 927. It's coming, it's coming. It was finally here. Gu Xingyun raised his head and stared at Li Tianlan in the air. The violent agitation in his heart made him numb all over. For a moment, he could not speak or even make the slightest movement. He had already anticipated this day. From the moment Li Tianlan killed Gu Qianchuan with one strike, or from the moment Li Tianlan killed Gu Qianchuan with one strike, or even earlier, when Li Tianlan became the combat capability of the invincible realm, he seemed to have expected this day. He had always been on guard. But in recent years, Kunlun City had been a little weak. Li Tianlan, who was shining like the sun, had been rising rapidly and dazzlingly. Gu Xingyun knew that he would attack Kunlun City sooner or later, but he didn't expect it to be so fast. In the snowy morning, he floated in the air with the 10,000-meter-long rainbow. In front of him was Kunlun City. It was the hub of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. He was the war god of Zhongzhou State. He said, Those who stand in my way will die. Gu Xingyun's body trembled slightly, not out of fear, but out of indescribable resentment and anger. He came to Kunlun City in a crushing manner. If he really took Li Qingqing away, it almost meant the official decline of Kunlun City. It also meant that Emperor Dong's palace would be above Kunlun City. Gu Xingyun's eyes turned scarlet. At that time, he carefully flattered the Li family and let his most beloved woman go to Li Guangtu's side. She even gave birth to a child for him. He made countless promises and invited a large number of helpers. He overthrew the Li family and took advantage of the situation. In the first few years when the foundation of Kunlun City was not stable, in order to consolidate its position, the elites of Kunlun City went all out to prove their position of defending Zhongzhou State after replacing the Li family. At the same time, they showed a smiling face to the people inside, especially to the Prince Group. During that period, they could even be said to be the vassal of the Prince Group. It was not easy for them to gain a foothold. What they next faced was the internal questioning and review of the treason case in Zhongzhou State. What could Gu Xingyun do? Fighting, continuous fighting. The newly established Special Warfare Group spared no effort to cleanse the Li family's forces. They used all kinds of means and owed countless favors both internally and externally. The power of the Li family was constantly being purged and dropped to the lowest point. They began to hide. The Wang family of Beihai also completed the shuffle of the Southeast Group with the help of the clarity of Kunlun City. But the good times had yet to come. Good days. Or King didn't come. Next, they would face the Wang family of Beihai and the Southeast Group. The Wang family of Beihai seemed to be greatly weakened after losing the Li family, a staunch ally. But after losing the balance, Mount Dibing became more and more unscrupulous. They fully demonstrated the foundation of the first wealthy family in Zhongzhou State and even the first wealthy family in the Dark World. In those years, under the suppression of the Wang family of Beihai, Kunlun City could not even breathe, because they were suppressed to the point where it was difficult for them to even survive. The aggressiveness of the Wang family of Beihai finally caused uneasiness in the parliament. The higher-ups began to step forward to coordinate the relationship between Kunlun City and Beihai. But without the Li family, Kunlun City could not keep Beihai in check. Some people were also a little dissatisfied with Kunlun City. In those years, Kunlun City also behaved with its tail between its legs. After constant coordination and multiple negotiations, a fragile balance was finally reached. Kunlun City carefully developed its power in Zhongzhou State. When it encountered the Wang family of Beihai, it gave way. When it encountered the Prince Group, it gave way. When it encountered the academics, it gave way. The constant concessions finally allowed the Special Warfare Group to accumulate some assets in a sullen state. But before Gu Xingyun could breathe a sigh of relief, Li Tianlan F** King appeared again. Then there was the Samsara Palace. He was seriously injured after losing the final battle with the master of Samsara Palace. In the final battle of Heaven Capital, Li Tianlan turned the tide and saved the loss of Zhongzhou State. The appearance of the purgatory of Heaven Capital completely stimulated the nerves of Kunlun City. And then, there was the chaotic war that lasted for 3 years in the Dark World. All the superpowers were in a mess, and he was also involved in Zhongzhou State. In Lin, he was seriously injured by Situ Cangyue with the setting sun. The chaos was chaotic. Finally, with the collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance, countless chaos in Snow Country completely turned into a detonated chaos. At this time, Li Tianlan came back. Very good, very powerful. The combat capability of the Invincible Realm, the perfect sword intent, the future chosen one, the marshal of the Snowdance Corps, Gu Xingyun was really angry at that time. He wanted Li Shi to kill Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu in Snow Country. Li Shi directly betrayed him. Gu Xingyun simply ignored it and slowly healed his injuries. He wanted to become an expert at the peak of the Invincible Realm in the new era and continue to rush forward with Kunlun City. He had not recovered from his injuries. Emperor Dong's palace rose, and Li Tianlan became his majesty. Then he came over and stood in front of Kunlun City, saying that those who stood in his way would die. Counting the past 20 years, Gu Xingyun suddenly found that he had overthrown the Li family and established Kunlun City. But for more than 20 years, under the appearance of high spirits, he had hardly lived a day of real comfort. Retreat, compromise, exchange, bow his head, all this was not even for them to make profits, but to gain a foothold. Now Kunlun City had really gained a foothold in Zhongzhou State. However, they had met the enemy that they wanted to get rid of the most and most wanted to get rid of. What could they do? Retreat? Compromise? Gu Xingyun straightened his body little by little. There was no room for retreat and compromise. If they retreated again this time, what would be left of the entire Kunlun City? They would return to the days when they were subordinate to others more than 20 years ago. What was the point of these years of grievance? Do you dare to kill me? Gu Xingyun stared at Li Tianlan and asked word by word. I don't dare. Li Tianlan's tone was ordinary, and this sentence was not convincing at all. But I want to go in. Do you dare to refuse? This is Kunlun City. Gu Xingyun's voice was heavy and bloody. Why don't I dare? Li Tianlan looked down at his watch. His eyes slowly moved away from Gu Xingyun and swept over the guards of Kunlun City. All the guards were tense when his eyes swept over them, but no one put down their weapons. Li Tianlan remained motionless. 3 minutes left. He only gave Kunlun City 10 minutes. All the blood in Gu Xingyun's body seemed to pour into his brain. His voice was hoarse and ferocious. Li Tianlan, don't go too far. 2 minutes. Li Tianlan said lightly. I can't give my daughter to you. She's my daughter, mine. Gu Xingyun roared wildly. Li Tianlan waited quietly. Time passed second by second. The morning light was getting brighter and brighter. 10 seconds. He suddenly spoke. the 10,000-meter-long rainbow in the distance had completely shrunk. His whole body was wrapped in colorful light, and his expression was blurred. 5 seconds. In the extremely oppressive atmosphere, countless people turned pale and subconsciously grasped the weapons in their hands. Some experts of the fire-flaming realm and the thunder-shocking realm of Kunlun City rushed over one after another. 3. In the light, Li Tianlan's voice was calm. 2. His steady and cold voice was without any bravado. He raised his hand in the light. The extremely rich colorful light condensed again in his hand. In the suffocating silence, the voice seemed extremely abrupt and cruel in heaven and earth. What? Go to hell! He gathered all his strength. Gu Xingyun roared furiously in an instant. 10 skills of true martial arts, 10th unique domain. The bright morning light turned into night in an instant. Gu Xingyun's body became twisted in the dark for a moment. All the injuries were forcefully suppressed. After a few minutes of preparation and adjustment, his aura kept rising in an extremely crazy manner, rising again and again, as if it would never end. The domain of the invincible realm, which was countless times thicker and more solid than that of Gu Qianchuan and Absolute, surged and spread. It was extremely quiet and dark. In an instant, the dark domain surrounded all the guards in front of the Kunlun City gate and protected them. The domain continued to spread. In the darkness, there was no longer a desperate vacuum. In the shortest amount of time, everywhere the domain passed, there was an astonishingly swift and fierce storm. This was Gu Xingyun's strongest power and his strongest domain. It was no exaggeration to say that at this moment, Gu Xingyun was in the best state he had ever been. After more than 2 years of silence, the peak of the invincible realm was already clearly visible in front of him. Although the injuries in his body had not yet healed, at this time, when he went all out, he was already better than himself more than 2 years ago. Gu Xingyun's eyes were cold, and he took a step forward in the domain. This was his domain, his home field. Between steps, his figure instantly crossed a distance of dozens of meters. In the dark domain, there were silent storms everywhere. It was all his sword energy and power. The sword energy all over the sky tore the dancing wind and snow, tore the snow-capped peaks between the mountains, and rushed directly to Li Tianlan. The next moment, Gu Xingyun's expression suddenly froze for a moment. In his sight, Li Tianlan was standing there. The colorful light around him looked more and more dazzling in the dark domain, so dazzling that it was even a little fake. But everyone could see that he was there, so real. But countless sword energy storms could not lock Li Tianlan's body at all. The domain roared and spread over. The moment it encountered Li Tianlan, it seemed to encounter an obstacle that needed to be avoided. He floated steadily in the dark void, and everything around him was not affected by the domain at all. The locking of the domain seemed to be completely ineffective against Li Tianlan. How was this possible? The bright light slowly flowed along Li Tianlan's arm and condensed little by little. Li Tianlan reappeared in Gu Xingyun's sight. But his existence became more and more illusory. Not to mention the sword energy storm in the domain. Now if Gu Xingyun closed his eyes, he could not even feel Li Tianlan's existence. The light condensed into a point in his palm. In the shining color, the luster became pure. You always seem to be unable to recognize the situation. Li Tianlan said quietly, but I like Kunlun City's resistance very much. This is the excuse I need. Gu Xingyun's heart sank for no reason, and he said coldly, you'd better know what you're doing, Li Tianlan. Don't forget what Kunlun City means to Zhongzhou State. Even if you die here today, it doesn't matter. Li Tianlan said lightly, it may have been important before, but now Zhongzhou State belongs to Emperor Dong's palace. You always can't recognize the situation, but now I can tell you that my country doesn't need the so-called nation-protecting war god. In the shining luster in his hand, his raised palm suddenly stopped. At that moment, Gu Xingyun seemed to feel great danger. He suddenly roared and appeared directly in front of Li Tianlan. He waved his fist. The thick and solid domain suddenly became twisted and violent. Li Tianlan's raised palm stretched forward. The rainbow-colored radiance had completely disappeared. His fingertips were already as red as blood. Chapter 928. Li Tianlan's movements were simple and casual. In the domain of the 10 skills of true martial arts, he stretched out his palm, neither fast nor slow, and it looked extremely clear. When he closed his fingers like a sword, he lightly tapped on Gu Xingyun's fist at the most appropriate time. The condensed scarlet luster bloomed in his fingers in an instant. It was the extremely condensed sword energy and killing intent, with the purest destruction and death. The fist and the finger separated. The expressionless Gu Xingyun's body seemed to move. In the silent domain, the sounds of collisions rang out like rain. Almost no one could see clearly what had happened. In most people's eyes, Gu Xingyun and Li Tianlan moved almost at the same time, but they had collided several times. The silent and dark domain still enveloped Li Tianlan steadily. Gu Xingyun, who seemed to have never moved, stood where he was, and his face had become extremely solemn. Streaks of blood flowed out from his sleeves, dripping down one by one. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes, and his aura became more and more dangerous. Stop now, go back to Tian'an or Yuzhou, and I can pretend that nothing happened today. Gu Xingyun's expression was solemn and cold. His words were tough, but in fact he took a step back. In the short fight just now, Gu Xingyun thought that he had figured out Li Tianlan's strength, and Li Tianlan should have known his recovery state. Both of them had a vague understanding of each other, so some things could be discussed. In fact, even if Li Tianlan couldn't take Li Qingqing away today, he could still get a lot of reputation by fighting with Gu Xingyun in front of the gate of Kunlun City and retreating. The influence of this matter might not be much less than that of him killing an invincible realm killer with one strike. Are you done? Li Tianlan said slowly. His face was pale and he stood there, but the aura under his body became more and more ethereal. In fact, I've always been curious about your strength. Everyone says that you are the invincible realm closest to the peak of the invincible realm. I don't know if you have made progress in the past few years, but from the strength you just showed, you are still not good enough. Li Tianlan laughed. If you are finished, Gu Xingyun suddenly retreated. His domain was his home field. As long as he fought within his domain, he was not afraid of the real peak of the invincible realm. In an instant, Gu Xingyun's body was like a phantom, retreating dozens of meters in the blink of an eye. However, a red light appeared in front of him. A dazzling blood-red color occupied his vision. Li Tianlan swung his fist and punched him hard in the face. It's my turn to play. A light voice sounded, and Li Tianlan's body appeared in front of Gu Xingyun. A huge power that could almost pierce through steel landed on Gu Xingyun's face. At the moment when his body leaned back, a fierce knee hit directly on his abdomen. His internal organs seemed to be torn at the same time. It was an instinctive reaction. Gu Xingyun leaned back and suddenly moved forward, bending his waist subconsciously. Elbow, uppercut, leg sweep, the storm of attacks fell on Gu Xingyun in an instant. Li Tianlan's strength was not strong, and he did not even carry much killing intent, but the endless attacks covered Gu Xingyun in an instant. Gu Xingyun retreated. Li Tianlan advanced. His figure was extremely fast, and it seemed that he was really not affected by Gu Xingyun's domain. In Gu Xingyun's suppressed and violent roar, his body was quickly suppressed to the gate of Kunlun City. Behind him were a large number of guards and experts of Kunlun City. In Li Tianlan's current state, it was not difficult for him to kill them than to eat and drink. Really, there was no way back. There was no way back. Then he would fight to the death. You're courting death. Gu Xingyun's body suddenly stopped in place. In an instant, countless attacks landed on various parts of his body. Gu Xingyun's body lit up, and his aura became stronger than ever. Li Tianlan's eyes condensed for a moment. In the shortest time, Gu Xingyun put his palms together. With him as the center, another darker and deeper domain directly enveloped Li Tianlan. Ninth secluded impasse. He still couldn't lock on Li Tianlan, but the second domain isolated the elites of Kunlun City, so he didn't need to lock on. Are you serious? Li Tianlan chuckled. Gu Xingyun's face was cold and gloomy, and he opened his hands without saying a word. The silent darkness suddenly rioted. The space was completely distorted in a shape visible to the naked eye. The whole domain was distorted, and the frenzied airflow surrounded Li Tianlun. The space began to collapse and shrink with him as the center. The frenzied airflow was like the sharpest blade, constantly slashing and tearing around him. The huge pulling force caused his body to clearly sway. His face was getting paler, but his eyes were getting crazier and crazier. He could clearly feel Gu Xingyun's state. From the moment the ninth secluded impasse appeared, Gu Xingyun's combat capability, whose aura had already reached the peak, increased again. Now he was at the real peak of the invincible realm. This was no longer a force, but an outburst similar to overdraft. To some extent, Gu Xingyun was destroying his future martial arts foundation in order to improve his strength. In this state, Gu Xingyun really reached the peak of the invincible realm, but there was no possibility for him to make any further progress in his life. Even if he could recover from his injury in the future, he would at most be at the peak of the invincible realm, and he would still be the weakest in the peak of the invincible realm. Not to mention Wang Tianzong and Lin Fengting before the breakthrough, he might not even be able to defeat Arcis in the crown state at the peak of the invincible realm, let alone Wang Tianzong and Lin Fengting before the breakthrough. Gu Xingyun had endured for more than 2 years. This was definitely not the price that he was willing to pay. But now that he had come to this point, the only thing he could do was to fight desperately. The violent power was stirring wildly around Gu Xingyun. Li Tianlun looked at Gu Xingyun's eyes. Gu Xingyun's eyes were already blood-red, showing a kind of determination and violence that almost lost his mind. This was interesting. No matter what was wrong with Gu Xingyun's mentality, he had a certain possibility to break through the peak of the invincible realm. Both his talent and his performance in the past 2 years could prove this. If he was just at the peak of the invincible realm, it was not worth Gu Xingyun's hiding for more than 2 years. Especially during the 2 years when Emperor Dong's palace rose rapidly, Kunlun City could really stay still. Such forbearance also showed that what Gu Xingyun wanted was not just a peak of the invincible realm. Obviously, he had a certain degree of confidence to attack the current realm of Lin Fengting and Li Guangtu. Li Tianlun was forcing him to cut off his own way forward. Even if he had firmly believed that he was invincible in the world, an enemy at the level of Li Guangtu was still a huge trouble for him. Every more such enemy was a variable. Li Tianlun would not hesitate to cut off Gu Xingyun's martial arts and limit him to the peak of the invincible realm. Since he could do it, Li Tianlun would not hesitate at all. Not to mention what would happen in the future, even now, he was not afraid of a weak man at the peak of the invincible realm. He couldn't kill Gu Xingyun. He couldn't, and he didn't dare to. Gu Xingyun himself knew this. Although the state-protecting god of war of Zhongzhou state had no clear rank, in the eyes of others, he had always been at the same level as the directors of Zhongzhou state. He was also the face of Zhongzhou state in the dark world and a symbolic figure in many foreign affairs of Zhongzhou state. It was not difficult to kill Gu Xingyun, but if he really died in Li Tianlun's hands, it was not only a slap in the face of the parliament, but also a slap in the face of the parliament. Li Tianlun couldn't do such a thing. Even Wang Tianzong and the Wang family of Beihai had only suppressed the development of Kunlun City for so many years. This bottom line was much more serious than killing the whole Qi family. It could be said that whoever touched this bottom line would die. But Gu Xingyun still had a reason to fight desperately. Li Tianlun didn't dare to kill him, but it didn't mean that he couldn't deal with the whole Kunlun City. He didn't even need to kill anyone. If Gu Xingyun didn't take action, with Li Tianlun's ability, he could turn Kunlun City into ruins in the shortest time. He took in the first master of Kunlun City, the wife of the governor of Kunlun City. Then he destroyed everything in Kunlun City in front of Gu Xingyun, took away Gu Xingyun's daughter, and left. If all this happened, Kunlun City would become the laughingstock of the whole dark world. The higher-ups would certainly vent their anger on Li Tianlun, but they would definitely reconsider Gu Xingyun's identity. What kind of god of war was a Zhongzhou state god of war whose wife and children were robbed and whose base camp was demolished? In this way, the image of Kunlun City as a stable special warfare center in Zhongzhou state would be shattered at once. At that time, no one would stop Li Tianlan from killing him. Maybe Li Tianlan would kill him as the new god of war of Zhongzhou state. At that time, Gu Xingyun would also have to fight desperately. It was indeed very tempting to break through to the peak of the invincible realm. But when there was no other choice, both his life and the future of Kunlun City were more important than the realm of martial arts. With a cold and furious roar, Gu Xingyun stretched out his hand and pulled fiercely in the void. He released the 9 secluded impasse within the absolute domain and the 10 absolute domains within the 9 secluded impasse. This was the 3rd domain. Kunlun City also practiced swordsmanship, but it took the path of using swords to form a formation. In the final analysis, the so-called formation was a domain. The biggest trump card of a domain-type invincible realm expert was naturally the domain. 100 meters around them formed a void. Within the void, almost all the masters below the invincible realm had no room to resist. In the battle of the same realm, compared with all kinds of sword energy, their fighting methods were simple but extremely terrifying, commonly known as matryoshka. They used their own strength to constantly form new domains, and then completely distorted and detonated the domains, thus forming an incredible group destructive power. Before their physical strength was exhausted, the layers of domains were almost endless. Gu Xingyun, who was completely crazy, did not care about anything. In the domain that was similar to the void environment, the storm kept howling and twisting. Layer after layer of domains exploded without reservation. The huge impact pushed Li Tianlan's body back constantly. In a short time, his body was pushed back hundreds of meters by the strong impact wave. In Gu Xingyun's sight, Li Tianlan's body seemed to be covered with countless red spots in an instant. That was blood. Gu Xingyun strode forward, and the space within a radius of hundreds of meters was enveloped by his domain. Li Tianlan seemed to become the center of the domain. Layers of twisting and shrinking domains squeezed toward him endlessly. His body lost balance and swayed left and right under the powerful impact. Li Tianlan seemed to have completely lost his patience. Gu Xingyun's state was very stable. That meant that his goal had been achieved. In this case, Li Tianlan smiled. He still wouldn't kill Gu Xingyun. But the current situation was that Gu Xingyun wanted to kill him. In the silent but violent storm, he raised his palm. In an instant, the black trench coat on his body seemed to have lost all its support and danced wildly. Only the raised sleeve was stable and fierce. At this moment, the raised arm was like the sharpest divine sword. Gu Xingyun rushed over desperately. Several domains formed around him at the same time. Li Tianlan's palm stood up. He stepped forward, stretched out his hand, and chopped down. It was simple, without any superfluous movements. But at this moment, as Li Tianlan's figure moved forward, this simple movement carried an indescribable overbearingness. In the constantly twisting domain, a stream of sword energy appeared silently and extended from Li Tianlan's palm. At this moment, Li Tianlan's palm seemed to extend countless times. Gu Xingyun's chest suddenly became stuffy, and he could not breathe smoothly. He raised his head in disbelief and looked at Li Tianlan's palm. The stream of sword energy took shape in an instant and stretched out, piercing through layers of domains without any pause. This was a sword move that Gu Xingyun was very familiar with. But it was also the most terrifying sword move he had ever seen with his own eyes. The Li family's sword 22, Break of the Sky. This was the Li family's absolute sword. In the past many years he had seen Li Honghe use it, Li Guangtu use it, Li Shi use it, and Summer Solstice use it. He had seen the sword 22 many times. But he had never seen such a terrifying break of the sky. This sword move gave him the feeling that it was not Li Tianlan who was using it at all. Instead, Li Tianlan had become the sword 22 itself, a sword. So although there was no sword in his hand, he took a step forward and smashed heaven and earth in an instant. The layers of domains were directly pierced through by the peerless sharpness. In the dark domain, endless light surged out like an erupting volcano. Finally, there were other sounds in front of Kunlun City. In the shining light, a black trench coat with the aura of death appeared directly in front of Gu Xingyun. The palm that chopped down was lifted, waved horizontally, and crossed Gu Xingyun's throat. Without any hesitation, Li Tianlan turned around and punched. The dragon's roar shook the wind and snow. Dragon Fist, Azure Dragon Cannon. Gu Xingyun, whose throat was completely torn, completely dissipated. That was the domain clone that Gu Xingyun condensed in a hurry after entering the peak of the invincible realm. It was similar to the sword energy clone. But obviously, the time was too short. Without any research in this area, the clone he condensed had no fighting capacity at all. The moment he turned around, the real Gu Xingyun appeared in front of Li Tianlan. Their fists collided fiercely. Li Tianlan's joints shook at the same time, and the incredible power directly crushed in front of Gu Xingyun. Like a small bus sprinting at full speed, it directly crashed into a fully loaded heavy truck. His body was blown away uncontrollably. The moment his feet were in the air, he finally saw Li Tianlan's state clearly. How could it be? Doubts flashed in his heart. Facing the two fists that followed closely, he subconsciously chose to avoid them. At this moment, Li Tianlan in his sight was almost intact. The blood caused by the shattering and explosion of countless layers of domains just now seemed to have completely disappeared. His body retreated quickly. He subconsciously stayed away from Kunlun City and retreated to the towering and lonely Qingyun Peak in front of Kunlun City. The domain formed in front of him again. Li Tianlan's body twisted for a moment. The domain was not broken. But Li Tianlan appeared directly outside the domain and appeared in front of him. Gu Xingyun's heart suddenly sank. He didn't know how he did it at all. Even the real chosen one could not pass through the solid domain of the peak of the invincible realm silently. The chosen one might be able to shatter the domain of the peak of the invincible realm by raising his hand. But the domain had been formed, and the other party directly passed through the domain. In less than half a second, Li Tianlan's body seemed to be walking in another world. He got rid of the connection with the real world. It was no longer a question of how to do it. It was impossible. But all this happened in front of him. The domain was ineffective. This also meant that any attack would not have any effect on Li Tianlan. Was it really invincible? Why was it like this? Gu Xingyun had no time to ask. Li Tianlan, who appeared in front of him, had raised his palm again. The starting gesture of Dragon Fist, Flying Dragon in the sky changed instantly. The first move of Killing Sky. Countless messy and entangled sword lights suddenly burst out from Li Tianlan's palm. The majestic sword qi shattered the domain that had not yet been completely formed around Gu Xingyun. The sword qi whistled wantonly in the world of ice and snow, and the snow was flying all over the sky. The messy sword qi rolled over Gu Xingyun's body, bringing with it a lot of blood, and created gullies that were dozens of meters long in the vast snow. Gu Xingyun was completely suppressed at this moment. The reason? It was the unexplainable shuttle. Under normal circumstances, Gu Xingyun was invincible. He was at the peak of the invincible realm. Although he was injured, compared with Li Tianlan, even if Li Tianlan had dual wind and thunder veins, he had a huge advantage in physical strength. Dual wind and thunder veins greatly enhanced Li Tianlan's destructive power, but it also meant a huge consumption of physical strength. When Gu Xingyun was full of physical strength, his domain was endless. It only took 1 second, or even half a second, for him to form a complete domain. It took time for Li Tianlan's sword energy to break the domain. Maybe it only took half a second, but Gu Xingyun could also form a new domain in this time. Li Tianlan was not in the invincible realm. As long as it dragged on, Gu Xingyun could exhaust Li Tianlan's physical strength. This was the simplest and safest way to win. Gu Xingyun had other ways, but this was the safest. But the inexplicable shuttle, which was obviously impossible, directly broke all this. His domain was formed, and Li Tianlan appeared directly in front of him from the domain. There was no time to break the domain, which meant that Gu Xingyun had no time to form a new domain. All this happened in that half a second. The inexplicable shuttle bought half a second. The Dragon Fist inexplicably turned into the heaven-killing move, and the sword energy completely shattered the domain that had just appeared but not completely formed. Gu Xingyun was completely suppressed. The sword energy and the wind and snow flew wildly. After the heaven-killing move, he stabbed forward with one hand, and the indomitable destruction directly left a blood hole on Gu Xingyun's body. Before the blood gushed out, the majestic and heavy sea-breaking move completely enveloped Gu Xingyun. The rotating eighth blade, sky-burning, flew over like a storm. The sword energy filled the sky, and the raging fire danced with the white snow. Gu Xingyun's body retreated to the foot of Qingyun Peak, and then began to go up without hesitation. His footsteps flew all the way on the snow as if it were flat ground. The ninth blade, Dusk. Li Tianlan soared into the air and stabbed straight, with unparalleled sharpness in his arm. A large amount of snow roared down from Qingyun Peak, covering the sky and the sun, almost forming an avalanche. In the snow curtain that covered the sky, Li Tianlan's arm flew over. The huge snow curtain, like the sky, was torn apart in an instant. His palm broke the wind and snow, and the amazing power turned into the purest sword energy, bringing up an arc of light up to 100 meters long. The extreme sharpness drew a natural arc in the air and directly chopped on the top of Qingyun Peak. There was a loud bang. No! Gu Xingyun's desperate roar suddenly sounded. A sword cut a mountain. Qingyun Peak, which had stood in Kunlun for many years, was directly broken by this sword. The nearly 200-meter-high peak was separated from Qingyun Peak, hanging upside down with endless ice and snow. The wind and snow almost covered Kunlun City, and huge stones fell straight to the gate of Kunlun City. The sword energy in the air broke the domain, and the raging fire brought by sky-burning move was still burning in the heavy snow. It was a scene of heaven and earth collapsing everywhere. Gu Xingyun rushed over like a madman, trying to break the huge stone of hundreds of meters. If this huge stone completely fell on Kunlun City, the huge impact could even directly destroy most of Kunlun City. The huge stone fell. Li Tianlan and Gu Xingyun fell at the same time. Gu Xingyun finally had time to form his complete domain. The domain enveloped the huge stone. The sword energy and the domain exploded at the same time. In the earth-shattering roar, the huge Qingyun Peak broke into countless boulders, sprinkling into the interior of Kunlun City like a destructive rainstorm. Li Tianlan's body tightened for a moment. The next second, a meteor suddenly appeared in the sky where the stones were flying. The boulders were still falling down. The entire world became incomparably silent. In the absolute silence, the meteor rushed directly to Gu Xingyun. All the boulders blocking the way of the meteor turned into powder in an instant. The distance of dozens of meters passed in a flash. The forever silent world. There seemed to be only sword light left between heaven and earth. The seemingly soft sword energy rushed to Gu Xingyun and stabbed him in the chest. Gu Xingyun's body was also falling. In a hurry, he just raised his hand and blocked his heart with his arm, seemingly in a panic. He lowered his head slightly and showed a grim smile. Li Tianlan came to him with the sword energy all over the sky. The sword light touched his arm. Blood splashed. In the severe pain, Gu Xingyun clearly felt that his left arm was empty. An arm suddenly flew out with blood dripping down. At the same time, he waved his right hand forward with a twisted expression. He clenched his right hand tightly, and there was a domain on his arm that had been condensed to the extreme. The domain contained countless sword formations he had learned in his life, and the sword energy was monstrous. The moment the blood splashed, the fist condensed with the power of an expert at the peak of the invincible realm also swung over. Completely, without any reservation, it hit Li Tianlan's heart. Clang! There was a sudden loud noise in the air of Qingyun Peak, which was like the end of the world. Gu Xingyun's voice sounded after the loud noise. The earth-shattering roar and the shouts of the crowd faintly came over. It was like a chaotic sound in a nightmare. She frowned. Half of her face was swollen, and she was awakened by the pain because of this small movement. She raised her hand subconsciously, touched her face, and then opened her eyes. In her sight, there was a vast expanse of snow. A loud chaotic sound came from behind her. She turned her head and saw Kunlun City in the distance, whose gate had been smashed, and Qingyun Peak, whose peak had been cut off by a sword in front of Kunlun City. Ah, she subconsciously let out a low cry, and then found that she was on the back of a man. He carried her on his back and walked forward unhurriedly. Where is this? Ah no, what happened? Who is it? She shook her head fiercely and subconsciously struggled on the man's back. In her sight, she could only see a strange side face that she seemed to have seen before. The man carrying her on his back was silent for a while, and then simply said, "I'm my brother-in-law." This chapter belongs to number 17. Chapter 9:29. The vast snow was still fluttering in the air, as if it would never change. It was extremely quiet between heaven and earth. He lay quietly on the snow, and the bright red blood soaked the snow under him. The feeling of warmth and coldness kept alternating on his body. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the snowflakes in the sky. He had seen this scene for many years, but at this time, it seemed that he was too tired. He suddenly felt that this scene was a little monotonous. No, it was boring or ugly, he was a little tired of watching it. He laughed at himself and breathed a little louder. The feeling of suffocation was stuck in his throat. His body trembled and he suddenly coughed violently. Blood flowed from the corners of his mouth, thick and red. He kept coughing, and the indescribable pain pulled him out of his dullness and loss. In front of him, nearby and far away, all kinds of sounds gradually came into his ears. He closed his eyes in pain, and he felt like he was dead inside. He lost. He was utterly defeated. Gu Xingyun had never thought that he would lose so badly. In the short battle, half of Kunlun City was razed to the ground and turned into ruins. The raging fire was burning in the ice and snow, and the air was full of messy and violent sword intent. His opponent had left Kunlun City. No, from today on, there might be no Kunlun City. He tried everything to overthrow the Li family, carefully, patiently, and painstakingly let Kunlun City gain a foothold in Zhongzhou State and the Dark World. Before he had time to breathe a sigh of relief, the history of Kunlun City was completely over in less than 15 minutes of battle. His toughness, persistence, and madness were meaningless in the face of absolute strength. Gu Xingyun looked at the sky, and his eyes were numb. The excruciating pain spread from all over his body, but the most painful part was his face. The shoe print was clearly imprinted on his face, like the most humiliating mark. He and Li Tianlan fought into Kunlun City from Qingyun Peak and destroyed the city gate. The Welcome Avenue near the city gate became riddled with holes in the shortest time. The nearby 3 blocks were completely smashed under the violent sword energy. Blood was flying and corpses were everywhere. At the end of the battle, the devil-like young figure directly tore apart the 10 Supreme Sword Formation, which had always been regarded as the core of Kunlun City, with unparalleled power. It was a super sword formation that Gu Xingyun personally presided over, supported by 2 superiors of the half-step invincible realm, 3 superiors of the peak of the thundershocking realm, 7 superiors of the thundershocking realm, and hundreds of fire-flaming realm elites of Kunlun City operated together. Awe-inspiring sword light, a majestic domain, and more than 100 densely packed figures. Thunder, fire, thunder, and the void. The final battle was in the central square of Kunlun City. The young figure stood in the center of the sword formation. Raging fire, thunder, void, ice wall, nothing could stop his footsteps. He completely tore apart all the obstacles in front of him in the most violent way, and finally stood in front of Gu Xingyun. In the horrified and confused eyes of countless people in Kunlun City, Li Tianlan stepped on Gu Xingyun's face. The huge force squeezed the muscles of his face and pressed his head into the hard and flat ground. Gu Xingyun's mind was only filled with the other party's emotionless question. How dare such a guy call himself the god of war of Zhongzhou State? Gu Xingyun laughed again. His whole body trembled, and his blood kept spreading. All kinds of chaotic voices continued in the distance. He knew very well that from this moment on he really had nothing. The beautiful dream that the whole Gu family had for more than 20 years was shattered by Li Tianlan in the cruelest way. The square that used to be located in the center of Kunlun City had been destroyed. The clean ground, green lawn, and bright winter plum blossoms were all in a mess. With Gu Xingyun as the center, there were corpses everywhere, flowing blood, scattered limbs, and broken swords. It was a scene of purgatory on earth. 10 Supreme Sword Formation was the strongest sword formation in Kunlun City, and it could even be said to be the strongest sword formation in the Dark World. Gu Xingyun at the peak of the Invincible Realm operated by himself. Half-step Invincible Realm, Thundershocking Realm, and hundreds of superiors of the Fire-Flaming Realm operated at the same time. In theory, such a sword formation could resist almost any enemy. At least before today, Kunlun City thought so. But today, 10 Supreme Sword Formation ran for 6 minutes. To be exact, it was 5 minutes and 51 seconds. Li Tianlan forcibly broke the formation. 136 elites of the Fire-Flaming Realm of Kunlun City died in the battle. 2 superiors of the Half-Step Invincible Realm died in the battle. 3 superiors of the Thundershocking Realm died in the battle. Of the 7 superiors of the Thundershocking Realm, 4 died in the battle, 1 was seriously injured, and 2 escaped. The most ironic thing was that among the superiors of the Thundershocking Realm who escaped, there was Gu Hanshan, the young master of Kunlun City who was once known as the future Heavenly Son and had the Heavenly King Heart. He was Gu Xingyun's biological son. All the forces of the entire Kunlun City were completely destroyed by Li Tianlan's power. In the 15-minute battle, he completely overturned the central city that had occupied the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State for more than 20 years. What else did Kunlun City have now? Or, what else could Zhongzhou State pay attention to Kunlun City now? Presumably, Zhongzhou State would not need a state-protecting war god whose face had been stepped into the ground. Gu Xingyun was in a trance. He thought of that day many years ago. On that day, the only girl he had ever loved in his life was caught as a small gift to please Li Guangtu. Yes, it was a small gift, not even a big gift. And on that day, Gu Dongqing, the patriarch of the Gu clan at that time, faced Gu Xingyun who was crazy and simply slapped him to the ground. That year, that day, at that time, Gu Changqing's shoe seemed to step on his face. At that time, he seemed to say something. How can such a guy interfere with the decision of the Gu clan? It seemed to be this sentence. It was really like, that was the beginning of Gu Xingyun. From the beginning, his ending seemed to be doomed. Everything was like reincarnation. More and more blood was on the ground. Gu Xingyun lay silently, motionless, and didn't want to care about anything. I found it. An ecstatic voice came from a distance. I found it. I found it. Father's arm, hurry up, keep up, do you all want to die? I'll kill you. Gu Hanshan's somewhat crazy voice sounded. In the battle, he was the first to withdraw from the battlefield of the 10 Supreme Sword Formation. After the battle, he was also the first to appear beside Gu Xingyun. A team of doctors from Kunlun City rushed over with a stretcher. Some of them carried a medical kit and began to stop Gu Xingyun's bleeding. His injury was so serious that no one dared to let him move easily at this time. The ambulances at the edge of the square drove over. More and more people came. In a trance, a doctor carefully examined his wound and said affirmatively, "Your Highness's arm can be connected. Hurry up." Busy, chaotic, running and moving figures. Gu Xingyun let them deal with the wound in a daze. At a certain moment, his eyes suddenly moved slightly. The doctors stopped the bleeding, carried him to the stretcher, and rushed to the nearby ambulance. In the rapid movement, a figure appeared silently beside him, moving at the same time as the ambulance. Gu Xingyun's eyes condensed for a moment. He suddenly found that he couldn't see the person's appearance no matter how hard he tried. He couldn't even determine the person's figure. He could only be sure that the person was a man. There were extremely obscure and irregular fluctuations all over his body. Like a cluster of starlight or a cloud, he was enveloped in it. This was Gu Xingyun's heart suddenly beat for a moment. He turned his head and stared at the person, or the cluster of starlight clouds beside the person. This was a domain. Gu Xingyun was very sure of this. But the level of the other party's domain was even more complicated than his boldest design. It was more complicated than his boldest idea. What was his boldest idea? It was to enter the peak of the invincible realm. It was the realm after breaking through the peak of the invincible realm. It was the domain at that level. But now, Gu Xingyun was in a trance for a moment. He suddenly found that the world seemed to have become a little unreal. Where did such a domain and such an expert come from? He blinked and wanted to say something, but he suddenly froze. The stretcher was still moving forward. The mysterious expert who had been following him in silence had already disappeared. It was as if he had never appeared, as if everything he had just seen was an illusion. The stretcher rushed across the square and into the ambulance. The ambulance began to go to the small hospital inside Kunlun City. The starlight cloud had appeared in a small courtyard behind Kunlun City. The doors and windows of the courtyard had been destroyed by a huge force. It seemed that someone had been hit hard not long ago, and his body had broken the doors and windows. It was a mess. The broken doors and windows and scattered glass fragments were everywhere in the living room. Although it was very messy, it could still be seen that the surrounding layout was extremely warm and elegant. His Majesty quietly walked around the living room, pushed the door open, and walked into the bedroom. A faint fragrance lingered in the bedroom. The bedroom full of girlish atmosphere was very tidy. The bed, the wardrobe, and everything else had not been moved at all. But the owner of the bedroom had disappeared. Maybe she would never come back. This city, the wind and snow outside the city, everything in the city, everything. It seemed that there was really nothing worth staying for her. He stood in the middle of the bedroom, sniffing the smell in the bedroom, and remained silent for a long time. He stood there motionless, like a frozen statue. It was noon in Kunlun City. The figure, who had stood in the girl's bedroom all morning, finally moved and sighed softly. "I'm a little late." His figure slowly disappeared from the bedroom, like a wisp of breeze, without a trace. In the luxurious ward on the top floor of Kunlun City Hospital, Gu Xingyun was covered with plaster and bandages, lying on the bed stiffly like a mummy. His wound had stopped bleeding, and his arm was temporarily connected. What awaited him next was a long period of recuperation. But what was the point of such rest and recuperation? The air in the ward fluctuated for a moment. Gu Xingyun's eyes moved, and he struggled to shift his gaze. The air in the room fluctuated like water waves. The first ray of light appeared in the fluctuating air. The fine light drifted in the air lightly and casually, outlining a blurry figure. The cloud of starlight gradually became lively. The figure that Gu Xingyun saw on the stretcher stood in front of his window again. Gu Xingyun looked at him and did not speak. He had seen a lot of invincible realm experts, but it was the first time that he had seen a person who could make such a fancy appearance. Gaudy, Gu Xingyun laughed at himself. This kind of thing that he could not understand also meant the other's realm. Obviously, this was an invincible realm expert at the same level as Li Tianlan. In the blurry clouds, the figure walked around the sickbed, as if observing his injuries. Gu Xingyun remained motionless and did not speak. He just let the opponent observe him. Not to mention now, even if he was in his heyday, it would not be difficult for the opponent to kill him with his realm. In this case, the so-called resistance was meaningless. He looked at the other quietly and did not even ask who the other was. "Let me introduce myself." In the cloud, the figure with an extremely vague face seemed to smile. The smile was a little indifferent. "You can call me Your Majesty." He looked at Gu Xingyun and asked slowly, "Is it Li Tianlan or Xianyuan Feng who hurt you like this?" You're tuning in to the Wandering Hero YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.